Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is August 10th, 2024. I am here with my partner on the podcast, Margi. Hey, Margi.
Hello.
And we are so excited today to interview someone I've wanted to interview for at least a couple years, if not more. Allison Shiffler. Hey, Allison.
Hi.
Allison is an amazing human with an amazing Mormon story, and that's why we're interviewing her. She is also one of my go-to therapists that I refer people to. She does all sorts of different types of therapy, including couples therapy, individual therapy, etc. But and her stuff can be found at therapy-with-allison.com. She practices here in Salt Lake and in Utah. But that's not why we're doing the interview. We're doing the interview because Allison's story, I think, is going to be helpful for a lot of people. And just to give you like a quick preview of some of the themes, raised Mormon, mixed faith parents, and how that played into her relationship with her parents, the passing away of a parent, grief, mission in Russia. These aren't necessarily in order. And also just normal Mormon journey stuff, but it definitely, the main theme today is what happens when the Mormon dream kind of goes off the rails and all the things that you feared could happen, might happen, or many of the things. But then, like, let's just say divorce or single parenthood or, trying to build a career that maybe you weren't prepared to build, whatever those things might be. But then what happens when you build a life where you're so grateful that you've been through all that because it's made you stronger and happier and healthier, and you avoided a lot of life choices that you're glad you avoided. Allison, I don't know. Did I summarize that okay?
Yeah, I think you summarized it great. That sounded great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, Allison's a jazz fan, so you got to know that.
I am.
So that's what you're in store for today. And Allison, before we begin, we always like to give people a chance to kind of state their intention of why they want to do the interview. So what do you got?
My intention is, especially with all those things you summarized, like these life events, and especially bringing into context that when we're raised Mormon, we're raised LDS, we have a pretty big expectation of things going a certain way. And it can kind of feel like failure if it doesn't. And so, I'll be honest, in addition to, hey, I'm taking clients and I'm meeting with couples and, sometimes knowing not only the clinical background of a therapist, but especially in the state of Utah, understanding that they know this culture, they know specifics about the psychology of what we go through in this church and in our trajectories, what we're healing from. But also, I think there's value both in the therapeutic trajectory and in healing from Mormonism, and knowing that it's not the worst thing for things to have not gone the way that you actually wanted them to originally. So, to summarize that again, whether you're raised Mormon or not, it doesn't really matter. That's, I think, an area of wisdom that we all hopefully understand with time, that it didn't all turn out the way I wanted it to, and that's okay. And in my case, it's actually amazing. This was my biggest fear. And I think predominantly culturally speaking, patriarchy speaking, it's a who wants to end up as a single mom? Like, that's like one of the worst things you can be. You can see that statistic on every state website, how many single moms there are. A group of people to study and understand in terms of the repercussions of how they live their lives. I think single moms are really blamed and villainized. And it's funny, the sequence of events with my Mormon upbringing and all these things we'll get to, how that's where it ended up. And that's where I am now. I have a long life to live, hopefully. But it's funny to me. It's actually kind of funny and sad that was like the worst thing, to not have a male partner or to not have a huge family. And life's great. Business is great. Yeah. Parenthood is great. My life is really, really wonderful, and I'm grateful for it. And it is the total opposite of what I ever expected. And it's the opposite of my patriarchal blessing. And it's the opposite of the guidance I was given. So, that's not, that is absolutely correlated to, the work that I've done and how I'm focusing on healing and doing all those things that are just important for us. But yeah, I think that's my intention here, that it's not going to go the way you planned, but don't be sad about that. Don't pause with that for a minute and think about what that means for life to not go the way that you planned.
Yeah. Meaningful. Yeah.
I'm stoked. All right.
Yeah.
Where does your Mormon story begin, Allison?
Oh my goodness. So before I was born, I was actually the first person in my family born into the church because my mom converted in her 30s. And I think for my parents, it was like a serendipitous thing. I'll be honest, there's certain aspects of my mom joining the church that I don't necessarily want to share as it's part of her story. But it was something that kept my family together for my mom to join the Mormon church.
Provide stability and structure during a hard time.
Right. Yeah. Specifically within their marriage. I think it was something that really saved their marriage for my mom to join the Mormon church. Now, my dad never did. It took my mom 9 months to join the church. She was really suspicious about Joseph Smith, didn't feel positive about it. She grew up Episcopalian.
What state was she taking the
This is in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, this is in Pennsylvania. So this is, felt board lessons, missionaries coming to my parents' home weekly, helping my mom go to church. My dad actually kind of stepped back. He loved the values, loved the missionaries, but he wasn't really committing to anything. So at the time, sister missionaries who didn't have a ton of rules would come over in the morning, get my 3 brothers ready, finding socks, 3 little kids, helping my mom go to church with her 3 kids. So the sister missionaries were really a key point in helping my mom get the support she needed, going to church, et cetera.
It's like early 80s? What is this?
Yeah, this was early 80s. Okay. And yeah, so I think they met in the 70s, met the missionaries in the 70s. But yeah, eventually my mom joined in the 80s. Okay. And that's been a really incredible foundation for, my family's community. And especially in a ward with so many converts, everybody kind of finding each other and supporting each other. So I grew up in the church. I kind of have this joke that I was always like an underachiever. I actually remember saying to my mom as a little kid, I don't think I'm going to make it to the celestial kingdom. Like, that sounds like a lot. I don't think I'm going to make it there. But can't you visit me in other kingdoms, Mom? And my mom's like, but I'm going to be in the celestial kingdom with Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother, and I want you to be with me. And I was like, right, but didn't you say you could visit me? Can you go? It'll be fine. That was my mentality of that sounds like a lot. I don't know about doing all this. I don't know about going for these 3 hours every Sunday, no snack. This is just a lot. So from a young age, I kind of felt like it was just kind of heavy and arduous, but a really big pain that I felt from the time I was a child is that we weren't sealed
as a family.
Because
your dad wasn't a member.
Right. My dad wasn't a member.
So they weren't temple married.
Right. They weren't temple married. In addition to the fact that my dad was a chain smoker, he smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, which is 60 cigarettes. I mean, he smoked a lot. So that combined with the anti-tobacco campaign in my elementary school, just kind of feeling like, oh my God, my dad's the reason we're not sealed. I also remember saying that to him as a little kid, you're the reason we're not going to be together, which is a pretty horrible thing to hear from your child. But I was just so mad about it. I would hear other little kids in fast and testimony, meaning bear testimony, I'm so grateful we're sealed. I'm so grateful we're all going to be together. Mm-hmm. And that's security you don't have as a kid. In fact, when you get into the details as you get older, you think to yourself, okay, so if we are all together and maybe dad won't accept it and maybe mom gets sealed to someone else because
Gets complicated.
That's a really complicated thing to conceptualize as a child and then as a teenager. And then
Because if your mom is going to make the celestial kingdom, according to Mormon theology, she has to be sealed to a Mormon man.
Right.
Which means she has to leave your dad either in this life or the next.
Right.
And that's the only way you can be with your mom in the celestial kingdom.
Right.
Which leaves your dad out. But then if she marries somebody else, who's your dad? Is it your dad, bio dad, or your stepdad who's in the celestial kingdom?
Right. How is this all going to work?
Yeah.
And is he just staying in like the purgatory spirit world and we're waiting for him? So in addition to the fear of my dad's a smoker, I'm afraid of him dying of lung cancer, we're not sealed as a family, just a lot of what I can now identify as anxiety, not really knowing this at the time, that like pretty anxious kid about the afterlife stuff. I mean, it really, on one hand, I was kind of apathetic, like, I don't want to do all this. I don't think I'll make it to the celestial kingdom. And then there was also the coexisting anxiety of we're not sealed and I don't have any control over that, you know? So the funny thing about that though is as a child that caused, you know, a lot of pain, and it was really sad to think about. And not that I'm going to fast forward yet, but eventually in my adult life, I would notice how that was kind of an advantage to smell coffee every morning of my life and kind of know that my parents could still, you know, respect each other and get along and have different beliefs. Although I think for the most part, they had similar beliefs. I think my dad did, for the most part, believe in Mormonism. But, and yeah, on a side note, he saved so much money having these missionaries come to our house every single week for decades. I mean, think of just the yard labor, let alone, I mean, they were there just like, we're going to baptize this guy. We're going to baptize this guy. He was a legend in the stake of everyone trying to baptize my dad. Mm-hmm. He was also a poultry salesman. And so he was giving the missionaries free chicken, like frozen chicken all the time. So he was a very beloved person in the ward, in the stake.
It's a swap of sorts.
Yeah. And I mean, it was hilarious though, because the missionaries would like come over, spend 3 hours in the yard doing everything. And then my dad would make them lunch and they'd be like, oh, hey, and we have a lesson. And he's like, oh, I don't have time for that. And so he just like, you know, contributed in a way of feeding them. But then the missionaries really, you know, upkept a lot of things in our home due to them, hoping that they could baptize him. So yeah, I definitely, you know, grew up. I mean, I'm a youngest. I'm an only girl. I have 3 older brothers. And I think there was a little bit of a rebellious part of me. You know, I believed in the church. I bore testimony. I gave talks all the time. I was the teen that a Bishopric member would be like, hey, so-and-so can't speak today. They backed out. Can you give a talk? And I'm like, I got this. Like, I loved it. It made me great at public speaking. There are aspects of being raised Mormon that were really beneficial and really, really good. And then there were these areas of guilt and shame that especially crept in, I would say, frankly, in adolescence and young women's, where it just started feeling terrible. But I didn't have, you know, the direction or the self-determination to know, like, this is bad. Instead, I was answering those questions with the bishop. Instead, I was feeling that shame. I remember one of the first damaging moments in a bishop's office was, you know, a temple recommend interview. My bishop's asking me, is there anything I need to tell him, you know, honest in your dealings? And I said, yeah, sometimes I lie to my parents about what I'm doing and who I'm hanging out with. And the bishop takes off his glasses and is like, you lie to your parents? And I said, well, what I mean is, like, I went to the movies the other day with like 2 guy friends. And I told my dad I was with like 2 girls. Like, they're just friends. That's it. Like, that's what I mean. And he's like, as if I just told him like the worst thing. I mean, yeah, I'm a teenager and I lie about who I'm hanging out with because my dad is paranoid about his only daughter and what she's doing. And yeah, went to the movies with some guy friends, lied about it. And I just remember feeling like, am I a bad person? Like, is that, And I wish I could have in that moment been like, no, you're normal. You're 15. It's not a big deal. You're lying about not big deal things. You're a pretty tame teenager. You're one of 5 Mormons in your high school.
Yeah.
You know, never really did anything other than heavy petting, making out. Like, I mean, the extent of my Mormon dedication in terms of like the choices I was making, I was a pretty low stress kid to my parents.
Yeah.
And so that bishop's interview, like I will just never forget that because I feel like it just got worse from there in terms of those moments of feeling so much shame. You know, I still remember that walking pornography talk. I still remember being in the Stake Center. I still remember that talk.
What was the talk? For those who don't know.
So the talk was about modesty. I believe it was centered toward the youth. It was like a fireside or like youth. Yeah, it was a fireside. And the talk is focusing on personal responsibility regarding modesty. So everything that I'm showing right now is the opposite of that, right? Like covering your shoulders,
Chest,
not wearing...
shoulders.
Right. All these things that are so unbelievably important, but with the specificity of you're kind of responsible for other people's thoughts and actions. So if you're not taking this seriously in obeying God and dressing modestly, then you're walking pornography. You're choosing to be attempting. You're choosing to be vulgar. That's the message.
You're intentionally creating bad thoughts in the minds of boys,
Right.
Mormon boys,
Right.
making them have sexual thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, what an awful thing to say to kids. Like, what an awful thing to say. And that's, something that I realized, especially, just going to my career for a minute, is that patriarchy hurts everybody. It hurts everybody. And to just emphasize young men's and young women's for a minute, girls, I mean, I'm not going to, young women, they're little girls, they're young girls, growing up to be women. And they're told that they have this responsibility for keeping men worthy, keeping their thoughts clean. That's their responsibility. And so how are you supposed to, develop your self-esteem, let alone connect with your body when you feel like your body is this weapon that you have to conceal? It's a really messed up way of thinking. And then boys are given this message of like, you're gross and you have these compulsive, awful urges. And the only way that that's okay is when you have a woman, which is like pretty objectifying, instead of talking about her as a person, talking about her as that's when you have sex and it's okay. So we're both screwed, right? Like as groups of people, as, as boys, as girls, we are taught these self-hating thoughts as opposed to what could have been like, hey, sexual urges are normal. It's a part of your body developing. You just got to learn boundaries with it. Like it's fine. Like, and not that church is necessarily a place to talk about healthy masturbation. I acknowledge that. But, acknowledging that there should have been more of a discussion regarding safety and regarding consent and regarding things that are not your responsibility, as opposed to these things that we interpret psychologically as so much shame. And, depending on your upbringing, depending on what your home is like, that could do a lot of long-term damage. This is where I say I'm like actually ironically privileged in coming from a part member family, because my underachiever brain was kind of like, well, we're not going to be sealed anyway. At one point I kind of thought to myself like, yeah, what is all this for? Like, this is so much work and so many details have to be put in place for this patriarchal blessing to come true or for us to all be together. It kind of seemed impossible, to be honest. And so as this led eventually to my faith deconstruction, the whole entire time I believed it, it just felt really awful. Just a lot of that shame was so damaging. So, upbringing, going to things like Pioneer Trek, which was awful. And I just remember starving and being so hungry and, the young women's program, I just thought for the most part, like, this just makes me feel like crap. So many of these lessons just make me feel bad. And I still believed it. I still did the thing. And I always wanted to go on a mission. That was something that I thought was pretty cool and kind of strong. And
that was before women were really encouraged to go on missions.
Right.
Can I ask you a quick question about
Yeah.
the shame and the guilt, this walking pornography idea? How did it land with you? Like, what I'm hearing so far is kind of, so I just did all the things but could you describe what it created in you? The damage, like, what did it do to you for those years? What is the difference between you receiving all those messages and even though you were still appearing like you were doing all the things, what happened to you?
I think like one of the hardest things about it is it really made me hate my body. And that's, I'm a girl mom now. And so it's like really hard to think about the fact that really translated for me into feeling like my body was wrong, as my body's developing specifically in a way that, my hips are getting bigger and my breasts are getting bigger, and all the, like, what I needed was the encouragement of like, hey, this transition is weird and it's okay. And just like, keep loving yourself. Like, all these changes are good. But I felt like, oh my goodness, like my boobs are getting bigger and that's wrong. Like I felt like my body developing the way that it was like bad for righteousness.
Yes.
Bad for life. It was not good. I felt like, especially in circumstances of, making out as a teenager or as a young adult or something, like if a boy ever touched me, and even if it was totally consensual, I felt like, oh my God, my body is like this vehicle for sin, which is like an awful thing.
Yeah.
When that means that you don't like yourself, you don't like your body, you wish your body was different. So, when I was in middle school, I was bulimic. I mean, I was trying to be Kate Moss. I was trying to be thin. I was trying to be skinny. I don't have the genetic makeup to ever look like the women that I wanted to look like growing up. I just thought I needed to be really, really thin. Like, that's the way that on one hand I can be the most modest, I don't have to like pull my shirt up and cover my cleavage and just like, so, it's hard enough to be a young girl growing up, growing into her body, you're getting your period, you're just like confused about all these things. But the modesty talk is what really made me feel like my body was wrong.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't love it and I couldn't be proud of it. And it took me a while to get there, and I'm really grateful that I got there. But that was, I think, the worst thing about it, that I just really, 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 really hated my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry.
Thank you.
It's so common.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah. Well, and it's a cool thing now, to raise a little girl who we've got a few rules in our home. One is, well, not rules, but we have no rules about food. You can eat like snacks whenever you want. You can eat whenever you want. And no rules when it comes to picking out clothes. So when we go to Target, get the tank top, get those shorts, get whatever. And it's really beautiful to see my kid try on clothes and be like, this looks good, as opposed to, the way I was raised. It was like, pull this up, get a bigger size, do that. It was like so meticulous about not being this walking pornography. That was a phrase I heard, once in this fireside talk, but I feel like that just resonated with me always.
Yeah.
And, especially the reinforcement from leaders of like two-piece bathing suits and like tank tops and all these things that I think for those of us who eventually leave Mormonism, we look back and say, these aren't big deals. It's just clothes. It's just a bathing suit. It's, none of these things are felonies, but in order to maintain this orthodoxy, this righteousness and commitment or loyalty, you have to see it as a big deal.
That's right. The intensity.
Right.
It's very serious and grave, the way it's communicated.
Right.
And it's partly because the Book of Mormon says that sexual sin is next to murder in severity. Not to be dramatic, but that's probably part of the doctrinal foundation for it. So Mormons are kind of stuck with it unless they're going to change the Book of Mormon, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's almost like, the only way for us to, whether you're in the church, whether you're out of the church, it doesn't really matter. The way to get to a point of mental health stability is to recognize these areas where you have autonomy and self-determination, meaning you feel good about your choices, you feel in touch with your intuition, and also like neutrality about certain things. Like it's a bathing suit. It's hot out. We're swimming. It's not. That's all it is.
That's right. It's a stomach. It's shoulders.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was going to just follow up and ask you if you felt this tension, right? Because on one side, you're getting messaging around your body being pornography, which I think, as you stated, right, it creates this disconnect, distrust for your own body. How about the foil to that? I'm curious, in your young women's experience, ever feeling like appearance, though, beauty, though, was a thing. It was like this idea of, for women, your offering is beauty.
Yeah.
So you have an extra layer of, right? You're already kind of disconnected from your body experience, from the sexual self side. But also there's this appearance kind of being part of your value as a woman.
Yeah.
And a certain type of beauty, I think, within Mormonism. Did you feel that? And how is that piece for you? Because I think that's a self-aggressive, potentially, avenue as well, and a further dissociation, right, from as opposed to how you feel in your body, that it's all about what your body looks like.
Yep. I felt that especially when I moved out to Utah in 2005, and I was going to UVSC at the time, now UVU, and I had some early morning classes, and I remember thinking, it's 8 a.m., and every woman here who's 18, 19, 20, 21 is like full face makeup. Her hair looks like amazing. She's wearing real nice clothes. I just remember coming out here being like, I didn't know I was from like an Appalachian trash town. Like I didn't know that, but, and like to some degree there's a lot of normalcy there. But then I came out here and everything is about, as a woman, about how you look and how you present. And, I think we can say that that's maybe specific to certain geographical regions, of the country, because that was kind of mind-blowing to me that everybody, women specifically, are just trying to look their best with this reverse gender peacocking, like trying to like win over, whoever it is, will be attracted to them, because finding your eternal companion, getting married, is like beating the final level of the video game. Like that's it. Like that's the most important thing. For a decade of my life, I was in singles wards, and that is such a big message of like getting married is everything. That's it. Getting married is everything. Temple marriage is everything. Finding the right person is everything. And, getting married is one of the highest stakes decisions you're ever going to make. It's a really important decision, and one that can last, lead to a lot of lasting happiness. However, to just make it about the immediacy of that security, like getting married is when you'll get sealed and it's okay because you're doing these, these temple covenants, et cetera. So that's all connected to it, like attracting your partner and, being, especially as a woman, being righteous, being modest, being beautiful, being pure. And what a missed opportunity to humanize girls and women a little more in talking about choices they can make in their life for their own fulfillment. Because, the verdict is in, it's 2024. And at this point, a lot of us know that getting married to a man is not associated with or correlated with happiness, success, fulfillment, and mental health stability.
Hey, wait a minute.
By no means, John, am I saying anything about all men whatsoever. But if you think that just getting married is now you're okay.
No.
It's not.
Totally.
And as some, just to, speak for a minute about something that I experienced, I was married for a very brief period of time while my daughter was a baby. So when I met this person, she was under 2 years old. She was still a baby. And there's a lot to say about that marriage and, about vulnerable aspects of what brought us together. And it eventually ended in divorce. But I noticed that when I got married, I noticed this collective sigh of relief among a lot of people that this single woman, this single mom, she found a guy, she found a man, she's married now. And I mean, there's a lot to say about the direction that went in and how there were very unhealthy aspects of this relationship. And it was not a great choice. It was not the right choice. It was not something that mutually we should have done. But again, going back to that idea of like being a single woman is the worst thing you can be, or being a single mom is the worst thing. Now, listen, it's hard. It's overwhelming. My to-do list is a lot, but no, it's not the worst thing. And I'm tempted to be a little tacky and tell you how much I make by saying, no, it's really not the worst thing. Life's good. But
like a bad marriage, way worse than being a single mom, right?
Yeah. The crippling anxiety that comes with being in a scenario that is unhealthy for you.
Yeah.
I mean, somatically, physically, my hope, especially mental health, is for us to get a lot more in tune with our bodies and understand when our body is trying to tell us something. If I had a nickel for every time I've noticed the difference between my client before and after while they were in an abusive relationship and when they leave. And after they leave, they're eating more and their hair gets thicker. And our body tries to give us these answers. But the problem with this, narrative in Mormonism of just get married and you'll be okay. Just get married and you'll be secure. That's absolutely not fair and not true. I think especially as a woman, if we are not encouraging women to decide what they want to do, whether it's go to college, whether it's go to trade school or go volunteer overseas, figure out what you want to do with your time and with your adulthood. But if you're in the waiting room of someone saving you as if you're like a helpless damsel, you're not going to be happy and fulfilled by that, first of all. But also, if it doesn't end well, you won't have anything. You won't have a foundation. You won't have a savings. You won't have a backup plan. You won't, that is really something that I have learned to value over time, which is, the way I need to raise my daughter is like opposite of the messages I was given in Mormonism. I talk to her every single day about how much I love my job. And I do. I love my job, which is great for mom guilt because I feel almost none of it. My biggest parenting approach is, what would I say to my kid? Because she's going to be a kid for the minority of her life. And, what would I say to her if she was feeling mom guilt about going to work, or if she's feeling mom guilt about going out to a girls' night and getting a sitter? And I'll be like, your kid's going to be fine. This is good for you. It's good for your kid, for their mom to be happy and stable. It's good for your kid, for their mom to go pursue her career and figure out what she wants to do. It's interesting. And I'm grateful, for this plot twist of life where I've become a mom because of all that it's taught me, in this very vicarious way, these things that I'm learning about what my stability looks like. It means that I can't be this martyr for my kid. I'm not just going to sacrifice my happiness so she could be happy. That doesn't work. It just doesn't. And I think within, patriarchal teachings in Mormonism, we teach women to be the ultimate sacrificers, like sacrifice your happiness, sacrifice your time, sacrifice your mental health, and just, give and give and give and give. But that doesn't work either. It doesn't work to be burned out and emotionally unstable. When I was in Young Women's, I thought I was going to have 10 kids. I remember making that list of qualities that I want in a husband, not acknowledging at all that I was bisexual because I didn't know that. But, just these qualities in a husband. Had to be a return missionary, had to believe in God, had to love God more than me, had to love Dave Matthews Band. I don't know, had to like a few funny ones in there, but like all of these, loyal to God type of qualities. And I remember thinking, I'm a really loving person. I'm going to be a great mom. I'm going to be a great bishop's wife. I'm going to have 10 kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm 38 and I know absolutely I would not do well with 10 kids. I just would not do well with that dedication to giving them all individual attention. With what I know now about raising children, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And even if I were a millionaire and could afford the help, I still wouldn't want to do it, right? So it's funny how that's changed into I'm raising one child and I take a lot of pride in our relationship and our closeness and, what I can talk to her about in terms of my mental health needs. If I'm having a heavy day at work, it's a burnout day. It's lots of trauma processing sessions, one after another. I get to say to my daughter, like, hey, I'm stressed. I'm going to go take a shower. I just need a little bit of alone time. Let me know if you need anything. In the meantime, you got Roblox, you got Simpsons, you're good, but I need like 20 minutes, okay? And I feel like that is so different from how I was raised. As women, we're raised with this idea of be this endless, well of giving, of just like showing up for people and doing everything, but like
for little in return.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And for what?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to weigh in on the discussion of Ballerina Farm because I just, I'm not trying to make everything a commentary. And also we're not in her mind, so we don't know how she feels. And that's not, I don't know that that's the most important thing. But I will say this, there is a defensive-ness to being a stay-at-home mom when you maybe secretly don't love it. And I get it. I get that perspective of I want to make this look like it works. I want to make this look like I'm happy and I'm good. And, some women have chosen that and they love it and they're killing it and they love being a stay-at-home mom and it's great and they're ready for the next thing when that chapter's over and it's wonderful. But there is a lot of pressure as a woman in any aspect of patriarchal direction where you feel like you have to make it work. I felt that way in Mormonism. I felt that way of like, no, this is totally all working for me. Like, this is going great. I love that I'm doing everything right and nothing in my patriarchal blessing is actually really happening.
I'm not oppressed. I'm empowered. Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And while, on one hand, calling out other people on their oppression while they can't see it themselves. I mean, there it is. There's the end of the discussion. Like when you're in a place to recognize what's going on, you're going to say it out loud and you're probably going to change your life. As someone who historically I've been in a few very unhealthy, some abusive relationships, and I could make that look amazing. I could make that look like I was happy. I could pride myself in being so forgiving and having a lot of empathy for someone's trauma, even though they're projecting it on me in a way that's actually harming me, right? We can make it look like things work for us. But, bringing therapy back into the discussion, one of the most important things I think we can do in caring for ourselves is being honest with ourselves, navigating our self-determination and saying, you know what, this isn't working for me and I want something else. Or like, I don't like being a stay-at-home mom and that's okay. And I've got options because I'm smart. And if I can multitask with all these kids, I could probably do a bunch of other things too, but that's it. It's not about the polarity of there's no way you can be happy if you're doing that. That's ridiculous. You've just got to be honest with yourself about whether or not it's working for you. I could never be a stay-at-home mom, ever. I know that about myself. And that's just because of the sequence of events in my life that have led me to the personality that I have, that I love going to work. I love it. And it works for my kid. This whole summer, everybody asks me, like, what does your daughter do in the summer while you're at work? I'm like, she's at an all-day summer camp daycare party. Like, she's killing it. It works for us, right? There's no mom guilt. There's no thinking of the other option of being a stay-at-home mom because it's working.
Yeah. Beautiful. Julie, that needs to be its own, larger short, because the world needs to hear Allison Shiffler's truth. I'm curious. So did you cover everything? We got to UVSC.
Yeah.
Did we cover everything in your high school experience that you wanted to cover in terms of what was formative for you?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, and then we can jump right to UVSC. I'm curious what happened
I would say, the majority of, high school adolescence, the main thing was just a lot of insecurity relating to my body.
Yeah.
The walking pornography stuff. And then really starting that foundational thinking of, I got to get married. That's the most important thing. I'm going to go to college. I don't know what I'm going to do. But in high school, I just kept thinking the most important thing is just going to college and getting married. That's it.
I have to say, my sister married a never Mormon who smoked. Mm-hmm. And so she raised 3 kids in the church with a husband who was never going to be able to take her to the social kingdom.
Yeah.
So I can relate to how you were kind of raised a little bit, maybe, through my sister. But I just can't imagine how you would have been coming to UVSC or coming to Utah saying, not on my watch, I'm going to marry a faithful Mormon boy, and I'm not going to raise my kids in a part member family, and my eternal companion is going to be with me in the social kingdom, unlike my mom and my dad. Is that right or not?
Yeah. I mean, when you really think about it, regarding a person's values, that the vulnerable emotional part of me, right? The literacy there was, I just wanted family. I just wanted a family. And if you grow up with this mentality of, this is my family, but after this, we're not really going to be together, it's probably going to really, create a very large desire to create that yourself. That's because it's out of your control.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I was thinking about one thing you said with regard to, especially in young women's, the end all being partnership, right? Yeah. Finding a husband and you had mentioned, this false notion of happiness and fulfillment just through the decision of being married. And I think, we can take on that level, as problematic as it is. And I was just going to say, I think that the church adds another level that we've touched on, but I just think it's important to make it overt. And that is that you cannot be saved to the highest kingdom without being married. So it's not just your happiness and fulfillment. And let's debate whether that's really true. But it's also that we actually, in this conditioning we receive, there's we can't reach the highest level without a man.
Yeah. Without
being married, right?
Well, and thinking of what that does to a young woman's self-esteem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I moved to New York, and that was in my late 20s, I had this mind-blowing experience. I was working as a babysitter, an on-call babysitter, just babysitting for a bunch of different families. And all the women I was working for, and most of them were, married in partnerships, but I had never been around rich women before.
Yeah.
I'd Google them on my phones and be like, oh, she produces Good Morning America. Oh, she's a really famous author. Oh, it was the coolest experience. Oh, I have goosebumps right now. Just being around these successful women. And they were great moms, and they're doing it all and, working really hard. But it's it was this anomaly to me.
Yeah.
And if you've lived in New York City, it's not an anomaly. Every woman there is just killing it with her Ivy League degree and all the stuff that she's organizing and accomplishing and doing. But, that was a mind-blowing thing in contrast to being raised with the idea you need a priesthood holder to be saved. You need a priesthood holder to go to heaven. You need a priesthood holder. So, I don't care how liberal your word was. You know, I hear a lot of that feedback sometimes. I'm like, well, I didn't get that message. It's like, okay, well, that's great if you didn't get that message. But predominantly speaking and psychologically speaking, that is pretty crushing to a girl or a woman's self-esteem to be told that in order to go to heaven, it's a man and like the association of his like genitalia to the priesthood as to why you can be saved. You know, like young women's, I think for a lot of us, is this missed opportunity. What would that be like if every single Sunday there was like a 10-minute spotlight of a woman talking about her career or, you know, or her day as a stay-at-home mom or whatever, but they're there to talk about it and how it's working for them. They're there to talk about it and say, this is what it looks like to get a PhD. This is how long I was in school, and this is what I do. I do forensic evaluations. It's really exciting. Or I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I also lead a book club, and I teach a dance class. And this, right? Like, we didn't get this understanding of what reality as a successful woman could look like. We were just given the helpmeet discussion, and that was it. That's enough, and it's righteous, and it's all you need. And it turns out that's actually killing a bunch of us, and we're really not okay.
Yeah. So you go to UVSC, you see all these women with perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect everything at 7 a.m. You really want to find that eternal companion, that
You're primed.
10 children, family. What happens?
So started at UVSC at the time. And I mean, I got to say, I got my associates in humanities while I was there for 2 years prior to my mission. And it was a really great experience for the specific reason that there were a lot of professors who had the intention of opening young minds, you know, in a very conservative area of the state. So I just remember my philosophy class. I remember my gender studies class and all these. At the time, I probably branded them as liberal ideas, but it was great. It was so many cool discussions really during that time, you know, navigating my values. So I loved it. It was wonderful. And at the same time, going to church every Sunday, going to like 3 activities a week, whatever it was, the singles ward pressure was a lot. And
what about dating Mormon boys?
Ugh.
Not good?
Not good.
Wait, what? That's the fun of Provo. What? That's why you go to Provo.
No, there were just, you know, I remember a particular conversation that went on in my apartment where a guy who I'm hopeful and I'm sure he's a great person now. And everybody says stupid things, but he was talking to a room full of women in my rain tree apartment, you know, 6 girls living in an apartment.
I lived in rain tree.
Oh, I loved it. It was great. It was fun. And he was talking to us about FP, meaning fat potential.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
Looking at the ankles and looking at and you know, having these moments as a young woman where you're like.
But put it in context. Why would a Mormon young man be talking about fat potential?
Well, because he was given this idea of this woman, pure bride as being his reward. I mean, that's really what it's about, right? This trophy wife idea of do the right things.
Mormon trophy wife, right?
Mormon trophy wife. Don't masturbate. Don't look at porn. Go on a mission. You know, just like be a non-human. I don't know how that all works, by the way, but like just do all these things righteously and your wife will be hot and she'll want to have sex with you all the time. And, you know.
And part of hot's being thin.
Yeah. Part of hot is like her body won't change. She will remain in a state of somehow already going through puberty, but like, you know, she like the whole, it's so disgusting.
And also,
kids and
that's what I was going to say. And also have all the babies and just return.
Right. Have all the babies
and all the depression.
The energy to have sex.
All the depression.
Oh my goodness. Right. So yeah, you know, it wasn't, it wasn't, of course, every single experience, but my experience dating Mormon men kind of sounded like this, going on a date and getting into some conversation and then this response of, "You're really smart." so many times I can't count it, to the point that I was like, this is ridiculous.
Wait,
so I've got
are you
thoughts,
saying that
I've
was
got
a problem?
opinions. I can keep up with you because this isn't really hard. And I got this response over and over and over again, only in Utah, by the way. You're really small. You know, like that was kind of the response I got in dating of like.
What was behind that reaction the boys had to you being smart? What were they thinking?
Well, I mean, it sounds like they were given some, conditioning, brainwashing, some conditioning of thinking that women serve this purpose of being pretty and sexually entertaining and great for companionship and great for providing. But, at some point, I don't know if we had gotten into like a discussion. I just remember being at a Red Robin at Provo Town Center Mall, and we were talking about areas of political, social funding, right? I'm in social work, so we're talking about some things, and this guy kind of looks at me because I think he didn't know what to say because he didn't know what he was talking about. It's not his field. And he just kind of paused with, "You're really smart," which is just disappointing. Like, by no means is that a compliment. Mm-hmm. I don't pause with a man and say, "You're really smart. I'm just really surprised by the fact that you have opinions and that you've read books and that you can like keep up," right? Like just a lot of those areas of sexism. And, on one hand, I can understand that there may be, for that man's experience, relevance to what our culture is, which is many, 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 many women discouraged from completing their education, discouraged from going on to get higher degrees, discouraged from, really focusing on their career. So,
and discouraged, don't you find, to connect with themselves, which is a way you form opinions. Right? So if you have a disconnected human, you're much more less apt to be able to say what you feel, say what you think, right?
Yeah. And I grew up in a family where being smart's valued. One of my favorite tattoos is my Simpsons tattoo there.
Okay, that's Homer, Marge, Lisa, Maggie, and Bart on the couch.
Was that part of your family culture?
Yeah. So this was every single Sunday at 8. Get off AOL, it's time for The Simpsons. It was like, that was our family time. That there's also,
I approve.
I was gonna say, are you feeling it?
Yeah, there's some emotional context to that, which is like, Simpsons was this constant in my life, in my family's life, where we were always coming back to watch The Simpsons. And that's also a little bit of a parallel to myself and my daughter of like, okay, I'm here for her. Like, we've got this really incredible dynamic. I don't know. There's a beautiful backstory to that tattoo. But when we watch The Simpsons, my parents would interject and say, "That's a reference to Gone with the Wind. That's a reference to Grapes of Wrath. That's a Frank Sinatra impression. That's what that." They were keeping us on top of all of the relevance of everything regarding society, regarding literature, regarding classic movies. So we grew up, with a lot of context and understanding of just all things art, all things culture. Yeah. I have very smart parents. And yeah, if there's anything on the whole entire planet I never, ever, ever, ever want to be, it's dumb. It's ignorant. It's unaware. So again, to come back to Utah, navigate this dating life and to be told with amazement, surprise, and dumbfoundedness, "You're really smart," was a really disappointing comment to hear over and over again.
Can I also just say, not to interrupt, did I interrupt? We'll finish what you're saying.
No, go ahead.
Well, my experience of men in Provo is they also, not only might they be surprised to find an educated woman who values the intellect and intellectual life, they might feel intimidated by the prospect of marrying one because they want to be the head of the household. They want to preside, and they don't want to preside over someone smarter than they are, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that possible? I'm not trying to put that on your story, but.
I'm going to be real honest with you. and maybe I don't want to be too identifying about this, but there was a time when I was in a very committed relationship where a man got emotional, like started to tear up as he said, "You have no idea how hard it is to argue with someone who's smarter than me." And I'm like supposed to not laugh in this moment. I'm supposed to like feel bad. Like what? You know, so yeah, it's not about hierarchy. Like what if we're both smart? What if we both can engage in problem solving? What if we both can navigate areas of logistics and operations in a family? Did you think it was all going to work if you're the head of the household and you have dominance over everybody?
Yeah.
Like, why would that work? Why would that make sense?
Underutilizing your resources.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In addition to the fact that that's a lot of pressure. So I don't really want that for you. And also everyone will be miserable if it's like a monarchy. Yeah. Like, what are we doing here?
For both of us.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so that was a funny thing of coming out to Utah, navigating this dating life, and noticing, you know, I don't really fit in with this culture very well.
Yes, I'm hearing that.
In terms of the righteousness pursuits, like trying to be good, you know, trying to do all the things, all of my callings were young women's, Relief Society president, gospel doctor and teacher. It was always things like that, you know, very dedicated callings, Sunday school teacher or whatever. But yeah, I was always just really disappointed, I would say culturally, by a lot of the Mormon men that I went on dates with and what they expected me to be as a woman, you know?
So with your experience at UVSC, is it kind of like intellectually you're being stimulated, you're exploring, you're feeling like a lot of exciting things that way? Yeah. I'm hearing dating, like, not super aligned. Mm-mm. What about your church experience? How would you talk about that? Were you feeling some alignment, total misalignment? Was culture like very much overwritten with the religion and your experience of church?
You know, my church experience, and I'm grateful for this. You know, it's at one point in my life, I probably thought this was really awful. And it was, because it was traumatic. And I'm grateful it happened. But after I came home from my mission, my church experience really took over how I saw Mormonism, the doctrine, et cetera, because I was in the process of getting disfellowshipped.
Do you want to talk about your mission first?
Maybe we should talk about the mission then, yeah.
So when you chose to go on a mission, the church had not yet really come out encouraging women to serve missions. Right. It was men.
Right.
So I'm curious what led to that decision and how your mission went.
I mean, on one hand, it was the default. I would say it was like 50% empowerment of, I'm going to do this. And I felt cool about it. Felt like it's kind of cool to be a sister missionary.
Would you have identified as a feminist by that point?
Not at that point. Okay. And maybe by definition I was, but that language was...
Yeah, forbidden.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I didn't like it. You know, I wouldn't have said that. And so, I put in my mission papers and got my mission call to Vladivostok, Russia. And when I read my letter, you know, in Raintree Apartments, my mom's on the phone and she goes, "Another post-communist country!" Because my one brother went to the Czech Republic, my other brother went to Romania. So I'm going to Vladivostok, Russia. I was excited, really, really, really excited. And it's funny, you know, it's funny how our stories change over time. If we were talking about this 5 years ago, I would probably have a lot more sad, maybe even negative things to say about my mission. But, you know, we get older. We have a wise summary and perspective on things as we look back. And my mission is why I got into my career. I mean, my mission was this part of my feeling that I wanted to work with people and I want to work with people who are going through really, really hard times. Because in Russia, as you walk around and ask everybody very casually how they are as missionaries, you know, trying to engage in conversation, so we're walking around saying, "Здравствуйте, как ваши дела?" Like, how are you? And you don't do, that's not a thing you do there. So people would answer with, I'm terrible. My brother died a few months ago. How are you? You know, it was like, and that kept happening. And as a young 21-year-old, I think, you know, a very important experience, especially of everyone's going through it. Like everyone has a lot of pain they're carrying. I just want to talk to them about the Book of Mormon. I just want to, you know, get more contacts and it's, you know, pretty pretty
so
profound.
Interesting. Yeah. That's so interesting because in a way, the way we've been conditioned, they're going off script.
Yeah.
Because we're used to like, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah.
I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah.
And so you're experiencing like, I've got the script, I've got that. And then they're showing up with realness, like real life, real pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also remember interviewing some people from Ukraine on Mormon Stories at one point or another. And I remember them saying that one of the relics of like the Soviet era is people keep to themselves.
Yeah.
So you don't get into other people's business and saying, hey, how are you doing?
Right.
That violates people's sense of like secrecy because of kind of KGB.
Right.
Did you feel that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think of it in like an American translation, it would be like someone walking up to you and say like, "Hey, what's the most painful thing that you're going through right now?" You'd be like, "Do I answer that?" Like, you know. So just asking.
How about why are they asking?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like, "Hi, how are you?" And we've got this, you know, for lack of a better word, agenda or intention of what we want to talk to them about, what we want to teach them about. And it's this very ironic moment of like, oh, they, you know, I really felt as a missionary, you know, the strong opinion that we were doing it wrong by just trying to baptize and just trying to reactivate people. It's like, we could just do service. We could just like do a lot of good things for this community and learn more about what they need. But, you know, there's this really huge expectation of baptizing people, and especially with regard to that pressure of it's like the prophet and then there's you. That's how important you are. You know, as a missionary, you're really given this pressure and this message of how important this time is, how important it is that you get this language right, how important it is that you work every single day, all day, waste and wear out your lives for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, they're going to be saved or they're not. This is everything. This is the most high stakes thing you can do, which is let that person pass you or pause and talk to them, and maybe you'll save their whole entire eternal existence. Yeah. And I felt that as much as I was this, you know, child underachiever of like, I don't think I'll make it to the celestial kingdom. I really felt a lot of pressure on my mission. I remember crying every single day in the MTC where I was for 3 months, and being so discouraged at how slow I was picking up Russian. Like I wasn't good enough and I wasn't getting it, and the conjugations are really complicated. And I'm learning how to speak in a way for people to be saved. So like I have to learn this. And eventually, you know, I picked up a lot of it, and I think I got pretty good at it because, you know, you're just thrown in there and you got to practice because you just have to start talking to people. And, you know, on one hand, there's a lot of aspects of that experience culturally, you know, traveling internationally as a young adult that were really good, like really, really important experiences that got me out of my American ethnocentrism. You know, like I would love for my kid to go travel somewhere internationally as a young adult. I think that's like an important experience for your psyche, absolutely. But the shame that came with it. I mean, I made a huge mistake on my mission that we were pretty discouraged to do. I read The Miracle of Forgiveness, which is like one of the worst things ever written. It's so horrible.
Why?
It's so awful.
Tell our audience why. It's written by Spencer B. Kimball, a former Mormon prophet. It was the church's go-to book for repentance for 30, 40 years. So why would it be awful?
It almost canonizes OCD thinking. Like, you have to think meticulously about every single thing. And if you forget it or you're not conscious of it and you don't actually say it out loud to a bishop, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it to heaven. You do have to remember every single thing.
Every bad thing you've done.
Every single thing.
And confess it to a bishop.
Right. It's like, I mean, to my understanding, they don't publish this anymore.
No, they took it out of print because it was so damaging.
It is so damaging. Yeah. And, and that's another funny thing, I think culture-wise regarding literature, doctrine, et cetera, these things that have done so much damage and have caused so much pain and self-hatred, we just say like, oh, it's out of print. No, that's fine. And are we really actually fixing anything with regard to how hard people are on themselves in the church? So I remember going to my mission president and confessing these two things, both of which were sexual in nature and very uncomfortable to say out loud, and things that, he's one of the few who kind of went like this with details. Yeah, he didn't, I think he's a really good person. He didn't want to hear any of it. It was like, it's okay. It's all right. You watched porn for about 10 whole seconds. It's okay. Yep. Or like you masturbated and like, it's fine. Just, it's okay. Just, pray with Heavenly Father and it's okay. And like, keep working. He was really sweet about it. But I remember days leading up to that, feeling really physically sick, like feeling like I was a horrible, 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 horrible person, or like I was sneaky, like I was hiding these things, and that I got past the mission interview. And I mean, none of these things were big deals at all, at all.
They were to Spencer W. Kimball.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, there were,
because in Spencer W. Kimball, masturbation leads to homosexuality.
Right. Which, I guess it adds up for a lot of us. But no, that was a really hard part of my mission of just feeling just unworthy, like feeling like a bad person.
Yeah.
And again, there were lots of beautiful experiences, interacted with a lot of really amazing people, a lot of really beautiful people. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I went. Like, again, living abroad as a young adult, it will take you out of your comfort zone and will build some grit. And it was good. It was really good.
One thing we have people do sometimes, Julie asked me to ask you this, is we have them just kind of bear their quick testimony in the language that they learned as they would have borne it as a missionary. Are you comfortable doing that?
Oh, man.
What would your testimony
I'm rusty. Hold on. Let me think.
I know God lives.
Я не знаю русский язык, потому что сейчас это вообще мусор, но я знаю, что
I know Jesus is the Christ.
Иисус Христа. Oh man, what's the word for Savior? Oh man, I'm rusty. I'm rusty.
I know the Book of Mormon is true.
Книга Мормона истина и Джозефа Смита. What is it? Oh man, yeah. I got it.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, I used to had the first vision memorized, had all that stuff, but I got to brush up.
Saw light descending.
Yeah.
So the way you've talked about your mission, it's almost like the environment, the culture, the people, kind of the external, you taking in a new reality in Russia, all that was really beneficial. But that your relationship and kind of the story or the way you related to yourself was actually an increase in guilt and shame. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, absolutely. Just in terms of how I saw myself, it made me harder on myself with, the inaccurate thinking that I had to try harder and I had to do better and I had to
I think that's what missions are designed to create.
Yeah.
It binds you feeling possibly worse about yourself.
Yeah.
And it makes you more committed to the church.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you're inadequate and the church is what's going to fix it.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Well, in any aspects of obedience, like just breaking a person down to make them docile, to make them feel less about themselves. I mean, when I really look back on where things changed for me and, this was after my mission, but I remember thinking to myself, I don't have to feel bad about this. But if your brain doesn't go there,
Right.
if you just keep feeling bad about normal things, normal behavior,
Even healthy things.
then you are in a position of, I mean, docile is just the word that comes to mind, kind of like being trained like a dog to obey.
There's a certain identity they want you to assume.
Yeah.
They want to break down any personal individual identity
Yeah.
and recreate in you the identity that
Right.
is optimal for the church, I think.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, it doesn't work. It really actually doesn't work to have members of the church navigate their own autonomy based on what feels good.
No.
Right.
It won't. It will all
We don't
fall
want that.
apart
No,
if people
That's a-
improve their mental health, navigate their autonomy and make life choices based on what feels good to them.
Yep.
It will all fall apart because someone will say, "No, kindly no, I'm not going to accept that calling. I'm really burned out right now, and I'm actually slowing down with work, and that calling doesn't work for me."
Don't want 10 kids,
Yeah.
Don't want to get married.
So
in my
many
early
No, we're
20s.
not going to go on a mission. We just had our 5th grandkid and we're just having a great time. So that doesn't
good.
work for us.
Yeah, that's not that
And
works.
so you can give that message to God because which is so ironic, right? Like that this is I would say the nucleus of wellness is your ability to connect with yourself and answer the question of like, what do I need? Like, what do I
Absolutely.
need to do? And so, yeah, when we go, into these areas of thinking where we are filled with so much shame, and I mean, I want to make a point. There are areas of responsibility that doesn't feel good and it's uncomfortable, but that's important. But that's not what shame is, right? Shame puts you in this place of just feeling like a bad person definitively. And I mean, how are you supposed to live the life you want to live when you can't even fathom what it's like to love yourself or care about yourself, you know?
Real quick, I get the sense that the Mormon church in Russia is not doing great, that maybe it's less healthy and strong now than it was 10
My
or
mission's
20 years
closed.
ago.
I mean, my mission
Okay.
isn't there anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, having served a Mormon mission in Russia for 1.5 years, while you were there, did you feel like the product you were offering them was improving their lives? If so, how? If not, why not?
No, I mean,
Not improving their lives?
no, I think maybe it was helpful for us to, for example, provide free English club, just like helping people learn a language, like whatever. There's some fun American service that we could do while we were there. But no, I mean, I feel awful about asking people in poverty to donate 10% of their earnings at the time, by the way, not understanding at all how much this church maintains in their assets and their investments and their, real estate. Like this church has an ungodly amount of money.
Hundreds of billions. just so
Hundreds
people
of
know.
billions. And that's just billions. We're not talking about all the other very strategic things that they do in terms of navigating their wealth, business strategies, et cetera. And there we are asking people to donate money, save up money for the temple trip to Seoul, Korea. Well, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous when we think about what the church is asking people to do in order to prove their loyalty, and they don't really have that much. There was a rule when I first came out to the field that the members were not allowed to feed us. And the reason for that was Russian people are very, very, very generous. And they will give you a whole spread, a whole table of food, regardless of how much they really have for the rest of the week. And so that was a rule initially of like, don't accept food. We can do tea, we can do cookies, we can do little snacks and things like that. But it's totally okay for us to make that tithing lesson, crucial within the first few lessons. Like we got to bang that one out and make sure that they're dedicated. It's stuff like that you look back on, and the only way you can make peace with it is saying I was young and I was doing the best I could at the time. And also that's what I was taught, like really intensely taught in a 3-month training period where I was isolated from society.
Right.
I mean, everything about it was really intense. But yeah, I look back and see the good that came from it in terms of my personal growth and how living abroad specifically helps me get into social work. But for the most part, I look back and regret everything that came out of my mouth.
Now that I think about like the way the current political climate is, Russia and America appear to be like arch enemies.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how safe it is for a Russian to believe that America has the one true church and that some white old dude in Utah in America is his true prophet. Like, is that even safe for a Russian to believe nowadays?
I mean, something interesting about serving a mission in Russia, Russians are very, very smart people. I can't make a monolith, comment like that, but I was unprepared for the level of critical thinking that they brought into our lessons. I was unprepared for the reading our investigators had done before I was. Like, if we're maybe talking like 7 years before I was going to get to that reading. So, the Russian people they've been through it. They've been through a lot in terms of all that they've survived. So for us to come there with this message of this new religion that started in America, and it was, a lot of people were a little suspicious of this.
In fact, Mormonism teaches that the United States is the true country, like the best country in the world. I wonder how that lands.
Well, and something that I'll say for maybe a specific age group of Russians, that's like hilarious to them because their level of patriotism is, I don't know, 50 times more than ours, if I'm being honest. So yeah, it's kind of funny to come there with this like, ethnocentric, right? Yeah, like, oh my goodness, we're the best, and they're like, no, you're not. We are actually. We always have been, And I think that level of patriotism also has to do again with the timeline and the history of everything they've been through. Back to geographically, Genghis Khan, like going through so much change, so much oppression, so much survival. And so it really, connects you, I think, as a people as to like how strong they are and what they've been through. Yeah. But yeah, that was, kind of felt like a punchline for them in terms of us presenting this savior America, just idealist view. It's a little embarrassing to look back on now.
I have a quick question. Yeah. I think you mentioned social work, your desire to learn more about social work, to pursue social work was kind of born in your mission. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
How so?
So, going back to that whole idea of asking people, how are you? Them getting into more than 20 times this happened where somebody would answer the question, hi, how are you? And disclosing something traumatic that had happened in their life, usually like a death or a tragedy. And again, as a 21-year-old, like, you don't know how young you are when you're in your 20s, like learning so much about the world. And that big takeaway of, everybody's going through it. And if they're not now, they will. Like life is a really painful experience. And so as I learned more, I think through those conversations just about the human experience, I knew that I wanted to work with people. And as I learned more about the field of social work specifically, I thought, if I have to work, if I have to make money, part of it is I'm an extrovert. Part of it is I just really like people and I like hearing people's stories. But social work also places an emphasis on broken or oppressive systems and just the reality of what we can do in moving forward to help people. And so it just felt good. It just felt right. The idea of like taking care of each other, but more so emphasizing work in this field where you get to contribute to something that is maybe preventative or, something that is fixing a system. So it just kind of, I don't know. It just kind of felt right. It felt like this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Is that what you pursued when you got off your mission?
Yep. So came home from my mission, finished my degree at Utah Valley State College, Utah Valley University. And, started out with an internship at DCFS. After that,
That's Utah's Child Protection
Yep,
Service.
Child Protective Services, yeah. So Department of Child and Family Services. And, everything in my background of social work, it's been very, very, very hard work, very deep in trauma. I mean, quite frankly.
Abuse, trauma.
You're just seeing
poverty.
The worst choices that people can make, and you're seeing how people are affected by that.
Right.
And so whether it was working with child abuse and neglect, and I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that also includes parents who don't have a lot of resources whatsoever to care for their children while they maybe are navigating addiction or low cognitive functioning or some aspect of their life that makes parenting incredibly hard. So it was a really good experience. I had really great supervisors who talked about the historical problems in child and family services and why we needed to, work more consciously and ethically in reuniting families and giving people resources. Mm-hmm. So that was a really great experience.
Were you afraid to graduate from a Utah university unmarried or not? I'm projecting, but
no. I don't think I was. I think throughout my 20s, I still had that mentality of, I'm still not married. I wonder when I'll get married. I thought I'd have kids by now. I thought I'd have 4 kids by now. I thought I'd have 10 kids by now. I definitely was thinking that throughout, my degree, throughout the education, et cetera. But, it was during my bachelor's in social work that I was also really starting to see the church for what it was. And the reason for that was because I was kind of in and out of a unhealthy dating relationship. And more specifically was having premarital sex after my mission with my boyfriend.
Now, how did you had been endowed in the Mormon temple.
Yep.
And you make covenants there, including the law of chastity.
Yep.
And if you violate those covenants before you're married, that can be really serious, including being excommunicated. So, and plus the guilt and shame of all the Spence W. Kimball stuff. So how did you start becoming sexually active as a returned missionary, especially after all the guilt and shame you had already been carrying?
It's funny because I think there's a psychological component in this that's really, really important, which is if you grow up with this, I call it, I blame Mormonism a little bit in terms of like my dependence for wanting a man to save me and wanting to be in a relationship. And then also I do know that I watched Little Mermaid on repeat as a child in a high chair. So like, what was it? Like just this whole dependence of like, I need to be with a man and I need to like, that's how I'm going to be okay. That's how I'm going to be happy. The relationship that I was in at the time was not very healthy, meaning like I wasn't very respected. It was like very on and off commitment, but I was also in this Mormon young woman brain as like, please love me, please respect me, please commit to me, please, and so it was easy for me to break my values at the time for someone who probably just wanted to have sex.
Yeah.
Not necessarily wanted anything respectful or focused on growth or commitment, but like, sex is fun and this girl's obsessed with me, so this is probably easy.
Yeah.
So, I won't get too deep into that, but I think there were some character flaws of this individual. My problem though was I was honest with my bishop, I told him very quickly that I had broken the law of chastity, had sex with my boyfriend, and that began a really life-changing path because it led to the lowest point in my mental health. I mean, I remember feeling, and this sounds kind of funny to say, but it wasn't funny to go through. I remember feeling and thinking to myself, I'm worse than Charles Manson. Like, I'm worse than an evil man who wants to kill. Like, I am a horrible, horrible person. Because I kept going to the bishop every single week to account for my actions. We had sex again, you know. And at one point, my bishop looked at me and he said, I just don't understand why this keeps happening. Were you sexually abused as a child? And, you know, there's a very large population of people who have experienced that. And that has absolutely nothing to do with being a 24-year-old who's new to having sex with her boyfriend, and you just kind of want to keep having sex. Especially if you have an unhealthy attachment mentality and you just want them to like you and you just want them to commit. So like it can become kind of a, you know, a toxic vehicle for connection in that particular context. So there were a lot of moments like that. There were a lot of problematic things said by bishops. There were a lot of moments of just actually feeling like I'm just a really bad person. That was the hardest thing about it. Just thinking like, I must be so bad because I keep doing this, and it's the temple, it's my covenants, it's my future. It's like all these things on this laminated patriarchal blessing that will never come true because I'm actively messing it up. And, you know, what I needed a bishop to say to me was like, hey, how's this guy treating you? Like, how are you feeling in this whole thing? Like, how is everything going? You know, because like I was not okay. I was not doing great. And I did have women in my life. I did have roommates seeing that, like, hey, this guy isn't respecting you. Also, this guy's doing this to other women. Also, you know, like, that was the issue. That was the concern. Right. That, you know, I was being taken advantage of by someone who was just kind of like an emotional vampire, just like wasn't really respecting me. I needed someone to check in on how I was doing, not whether or not I was keeping my covenants.
The bishop's like, wait, are you doing it? Are you still doing it?
Right.
That's all he was trained to care about.
Right. And so that led to a disciplinary council.
Oh, no. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, went to 2 of those.
So do you want to tell our audience, especially our Never Mormons, what that's like?
So
what that is?
A disciplinary council, there is absolutely a scene in the Handmaid's Tale TV show that depicts something like this. But in my case, so I'm a young woman, I'm 24, and I enter a room where there's a half circle of men, and I would say maybe 7 of them, although one of them was a man my age in priesthood, in the priesthood, you know, because he was filling in for someone. So he got to be there to hear everything. So
someone you would be attending church with.
Right. A guy who could have asked me out on a date or something. He was filling in like for someone in the Bishopric or something. I remember thinking like, why is he here? Yeah. Like he's going to listen to all this. So Allison, tell us what happened. Tell us why you're here. Tell us about breaking your covenants. And, you know, you're thinking to yourself, okay, should I be detailed? Should I tell them everything? I mean, the gist of it is I broke my covenants and had sex with my boyfriend. I mean, that's it. But I noticed that they wanted me, when I wasn't getting emotional, they wanted me to dig deeper. In fact, I got the feedback of, Allison, it doesn't really seem like you feel really that bad. And when this guy said that, I remember just breaking down. Like, of course I feel bad. I'm not allowed to go to the temple. Of course I feel bad. I'm not teaching anymore. I don't have a calling. Of course I feel bad. I'm not allowed to pray in public. And last Sunday, at the end of Sunday school, someone said, Sister Shiffler, could you please say the closing prayer? And I had to say, no, I can't.
Or when the sacrament's passed to you in front of all your peers, what did you have to do?
And you can't take it.
You pass it right along, right?
And, you know, when we say these things out loud, I mean, it's asinine. Like the public shame, this sounds medieval. This is insane. It's actually so awful and damaging that we make worthiness this public thing that everybody has to see and approve of for you.
Right.
And in the case of, being honest with your bishop, all power to everybody who lies to their bishops, by the way. Like, for me to just say, yeah, okay, we had sex again. And then this leads to a disciplinary council where I feel like a really harmful person in society, just like this level of shame I'm feeling. So that led to being disfellowshipped. I want to say at first I was like, I don't know. It was a more casual disfellowship. And then in the second council, I was officially disfellowshipped. I forget what the first one was.
What does that mean when you get disfellowshipped? How do they tell you? What do they tell you?
So they inform you that you cannot have a temple recommend, meaning you cannot attend the temple. I was encouraged to walk around the temple grounds, which I did many times, just walking outside.
Do you have to take your garments off, or are you allowed to keep wearing your garments?
I think they can be specific or individual about that. I was told to keep wearing mine.
Okay.
No taking the sacrament, no calling, no praying in public was the one where I was like, what? Okay. And so I think that was the main summary of it. But yeah, it was awful.
And how does it get undone? How does it get removed or lifted, did they say?
I mean, you got to be good. You got to be good for a long time, and we'll see how it goes. We'll check on it whenever, the right bishop, maybe in a future ward.
You.
Yeah.
We'll evaluate.
Yeah. We'll just kind of go with the feeling of like, do we, I don't know.
So 6 months, like 6 months, like 3 months, what?
I don't know if they gave me a timeline. I think they just said like, it'll be a while, probably 6 months, maybe to a year. Ugh. But this was something that went on for a few years. And, for me specifically, what happened was I ended up continuing my path of being a normal young woman in college and continued to have sex, which, for the most part were pretty positive consensual experiences. But I remember getting to a point where I just thought, I don't feel bad anymore. I don't feel
so
bad
they were
about
right.
this.
The disciplinary council was right. You eventually didn't feel bad.
Right. Yeah. Which is ironic because in that room, I felt like I was about to be burned at the stake. Yeah. Like I was Hester Prynne. It was just awful.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I think I just kept thinking to myself, like, I'm just having normal experiences. That first one with that guy I was dating, there were a lot of emotionally unhealthy things there. But there were also some positive sexual experiences, where people were safe and people used protection and, asked questions and it wasn't bad. And I just thought, I don't need to feel bad about this. It's almost like how we have these phrases like the veil was becoming thinner. It's like
your eyes were open. Yeah,
my eyes were open. Exactly. I was just seeing a little bit more clearly, like I'm not doing anything harmful. And I just don't think I need to feel bad about this anymore. So this continued as I was in Utah, living in Salt Lake. So doing the disciplinary stuff down in Utah Valley, moved up to Salt Lake, did disciplinary stuff up here. Whew. And trying my hardest. And eventually I moved to New York. And this is when I'm 26. I moved to New York and I'm informing my bishop, my branch president actually, in my Brooklyn singles ward, like, okay, I got to let you know I don't have a temple recommend, but I'm working on it. And
just wherever you go, you're having to read.
Yep. This is my scarlet letter. Let me give you the background of it. Like, oh my goodness. And so eventually, I'm living in New York, I'm working as a nanny. I'm actually living with my friend who I met in the MTC, and he's in New York and he's gay now and he's living his life. And so it's like kind of an interesting, roommate dynamic of a lot of us that are kind of navigating our own ways with Mormonism. And I had a real fun life and I was trying things and partying and doing a lot of great things that I couldn't do for too long because it's too exhausting. The nightlife, the club life, the experimentation was safe and fine, but it ended. And I actually ended up applying for Columbia University. It was my mom actually who said, "Are you ever going to get your master's? Are you ever going to like do that?" I think, on one hand, I wasn't married. So I think my mom was like, "Hey, these are some options," but she was encouraging me. So I applied to Columbia University. I got in, and then 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And I mean, to be honest, I really knew very instantly that I was going to do both. Mm-hmm. I knew that the biological dad was not going to be involved or at capacity to be involved. And when I went to inform my bishop of this, because this was a big thing to inform him of, which is, hey, I know we're working on this whole temple recommend stuff. I'm pregnant and I'm single, and, I'm not going to give you the whole background on that, Bishop, but I'm keeping this baby. I'm going to Columbia. I'm going to do this. And his response was, well, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I am very disappointed.
What the?
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. And the funny thing about that is it's almost like I was free from that point on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to keep trying to be impossibly good. I don't have to keep following these rules. And also, no thanks.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm 29 at the time.
Who are you, by the way?
Yeah, I'm pregnant. I got into an Ivy League school. You don't know where I grew up. Like, this is a big deal. And I'm really proud of myself. And I'm taking my social work education to like a different level. And I'm really excited about this. And I know this might be a little crazy, but also maybe it isn't crazy to start a family when I'm starting my education and when I'm in a place of like actually starting to feel really good about myself.
Yeah.
And, not that it's the most ideal scenario to, raise a child by yourself and start out with, government assistance, et cetera. On one hand, what is ideal? I don't know, because the reason I did it was because of the contrast of what Mormonism told me I had to do. So I had a baby without a man. He gave me half a zygote, don't get me wrong, but like without a man, like I got pregnant. I went to all my appointments, getting all my blood work done, did all my stuff, did my Columbia orientation, did my first semester, bouncing my baby on my back, wearing her, writing papers, living off of 5 cups of coffee because I read the research on pregnancy, which is like, you can have 5 cups of coffee when you're pregnant. Don't do more than that. Anyway, so the first year I'm pregnant, second year I have a baby.
Can I ask a question?
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there a process of deciding whether you wanted to keep the baby? And if so, what was that? If you want to talk about it.
Sure. I'm going to be really honest with you. I've had a baby full term. I've also had an abortion. And to me, it's a gift to have had those 2 experiences, both of which were completely about my intuition, my intellectual navigation of what I needed to do, being honest with myself about what I wanted to do, and also taking away all the goddamn stigma about what people would think of me if I did either or. I had to let go of that. Like, I had to let go of my family being embarrassed that I'm having a baby by myself. I just had to.
Yeah.
I had to let go of people saying, what do you think that's all about? Why do you think Allison's having a baby by herself? I had to let go of the judgment, which is really interesting, coming back to this public worthiness thing of being so concerned of what your whole ward sees when they see you.
Yes,
being so concerned with what people see when they see you.
Yes.
And to actually just, it's like my daughter saved me. Like I got pregnant and had this realization really soon of, you can do this. Like, of course you can do this.
Yeah.
Your body's incredible. And like your placenta is this powerhouse of nutrients and she's doing great. And I have everything I need.
Yeah.
And so I deliver this baby in the middle of the grad school program. I breastfed her, which was a really beautiful experience of just bonding and also feeling so powerful, feeling like my body's keeping this baby alive and she's thriving and she looks up at me and smiles. And like, it was really positive. It was really, really beautiful. And also like this plot twist that this can be so good. It's not sad. It's not a sad story.
Yeah.
It's not a tragedy that I'm doing this by myself. It's not a tragedy that the dad isn't involved. Anything that we can get caught up on with regard to other people's perception or how they see you. I mean, that will affect your own perception if you let that deepen in your own self-esteem and self-worth. I had to believe that I could do this program. I had to believe that I am capable of being a really, really good mom.
Yeah.
And it's like that was this rebellion against Mormonism. I mean, I really think of it that way of like my choice in doing this was a total contrast of what I was taught is the right way to do things.
Yeah.
Because if you really think about it, all hell breaks loose in Mormonism if women believe that they can do things by themselves. And you can, Mm-hmm. And again, as a disclaimer and as a couples therapist, I love love and I love people working on things, and it's an amazing thing. And also coming back to my own life, which is I didn't know that. I didn't know I could do it by myself. I didn't know I could write those 360 papers and get all A's. I think I got 1B. I didn't know I was that smart. I had no idea. I had no idea I was that smart. I had no idea I was that capable. I had no idea that I could do something so unbelievably hard and come out of it being so proud. Mm. I mean, before everything was just intimidating or seemingly impossible. And so it's just funny when things don't work out, when they go in this completely different direction, and yet it's better. It's better than anything I could imagine.
I love it. So, you went to Utah with the idea of finding your eternal companion and having the 10 kids. And then you leave Utah without having even gotten married. And, and then all of a sudden you find yourself with the child not married at all, which is like Mormon nightmare from the Mormon perspective.
Yeah.
What's your faith? What's your conceptualization as you as a Mormon and your faith and your vision for your life as a faithful Mormon? What's it doing by the time you're having this baby?
It's funny. The 2015 policy leak, is that what we should call it? Children of gay couples can't get baptized, right? So that came...
Is that the year your child
That came out while I was pregnant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That came out while I was pregnant. And that was it.
It's where the Mormon Church, just for those who don't know, it's where the Mormon Church was so mad that same-sex marriage had been legalized across the country that they said, if you are same-sex married and have kids, your kids can't be members, they can't get baptized, they can't, even get baptized until they're 18, and only after they denounce your marriage as illegitimate.
Yeah.
And it was automatic apostasy and grounds for excommunication.
Yeah.
If you were in an unmarried same-sex relationship, the act of getting legally same-sex married was immediate grounds for apostasy, which made same-sex married Mormons worse than rapists or child abusers in the eyes of Mormons,
right?
Because rape and incest was not immediate grounds for excommunication, but same-sex marriage oddly was. So you didn't like that?
So, I want to start off by saying...
As a social worker, you didn't like that?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I mean, let's go there, though. So, just to start off, there were a few things in my life that gave me that twinge of, ooh, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And maybe that started with me being a child saying, I don't think I'll go to the Celestial Kingdom. That's hard. I don't know. But when I was in college, I remember watching a documentary called Jesus Camp, which is about small children feeling, like the responsibility of the atonement and all these. And I remember watching that and going, oh, whoa. This seems abusive. This seems bad. I remember that. I remember going on a Tinder date in New York, describing a disciplinary council to someone who was never Mormon, never religious. And as I'm talking about it, I guess kind of casually, he looks at me and he goes, hold on. That's really messed up, right? Like, are you okay after going through that? And that was a really profound moment of this man, really smart, Ivy League educated, but he's just looking at me as a feminist. He's looking at me and saying, that's really messed up that they sat in a half circle and asked you those questions. Like, I just want to make sure you know that. That was a really profound moment for me.
Yeah.
And then when this thing happened in 2015, it all just went away in a way that was actually like 500 pounds was lifted off of my body.
What went away?
I didn't believe any of it anymore.
Oh.
It disappeared.
Like evaporated.
It evaporated.
Your Mormon beliefs.
This isn't from God. And now I don't really think I have that connection anymore. None of it just all went away because it was so political.
Isn't it weird? Maybe not weird, maybe totally predictable, that it wasn't the awful feelings you had in your mission. It wasn't the way your dad was treated. It wasn't the way bishops treated you. It wasn't multiple disciplinary councils that made you feel shitty about yourself. None of the bad stuff that happened to you led to it all evaporating. It was something you felt, I guess at the time, by proxy for other people that weren't you, and that horrific treatment that was a problem for you, but not the horrific treatment that you yourself had experienced. I don't know.
I mean, I had a baby with, in terms of conception, right? My baby was conceived through what you can call heterosexual sex, right? And now I'm single and I'm raising and I'm carrying this baby, this pregnancy by myself, but guaranteed they would have blessed her as a baby, obviously to get the name on the record, but guaranteed they would have blessed her because of the fact that she was conceived by a man and a woman.
Right.
Even though I'm also Hester Prynne, in another area of this whole thing, but we'll bless the baby. Like, we won't punish the baby. We'll bless the baby. You can't go to the temple or anything, but we want that baby's name on it. Right. There were just so many things about it. And at the same time, my roommate, who I met in the MTC, said, oh, I'm done now. I was waiting for you guys to come around, and now I am totally not welcome. So as I'm pregnant, I'm also witnessing his experience as a gay man, born and raised raised in Utah, and, having this experience of rejection in 2015. So I'm witnessing this with him, and I'm thinking to myself, so you're pushing him away, and I'm okay because at the time identify as heterosexual, and that's why I'm good. Like, that's why I'm okay. Because I am being treated, on one hand, I'm being treated like garbage for my status of being single and pregnant. And yet there's something so confusing about, but it's hetero, and so my baby's okay. Right. It not only did it not make sense, it just felt gross. My body was screaming with more intuition that I was actually able to access. And I just thought kind of the same thing. I don't have to feel guilt. I don't have to feel bad. Yeah. I'm going to do this program. I'm going to have this baby. I am determined to do well. I think I'll do well, but I'm also determined to work hard. And I don't need all this. Like, none of this is really helping me anymore. But in all seriousness, without even ever getting into history at this point, and I eventually did, but without getting into the church history, without getting into too much complexity, all I knew was the policies were created by, frankly, like white sexist men. Like there is no room for us to really value the intellect of women in this church. And so why the hell would I stay here?
Right.
No.
Yeah. All right. I have a question around how you're describing this shift where you go from kind of really caring, being conditioned to care and really caring about what people think of you, right? To not.
Yeah.
Because you kind of talked about it. Was it something that took a lot of time? Was it like really a sudden shift, like a moment of just sort of like, how would you describe that?
You know, I think that was something that maybe in high school kind of started in 11th grade. I remember observing the culture of high school, people wanting to, have cool clothes and have cool bags. I was on the swim team. And this one night at a pasta party that we had before like regionals or districts or something, all the guys were shaving their heads. Guys were shaving their heads. And I was asked like, hey, do you want to shave your head too? Like we were always trying to get a girl to do it. And I did it in 11th grade, shaved my head for the swim team. Someone gave me $100. And I remember coming home that night and like playing Sims on my computer and my cat jumps up on my lap. And I had this moment of like, it's still me. Like my cat doesn't really care. And so many of my friends were like, wow, this is so cool. And other friends were like, what are you doing? Winter ball is next week. How could you shave your head? And I mean, it's funny, but that was like a really early experience where I thought all the stuff that I was taught to think matters kind of doesn't, like material things or just like being pretty all the time or being, presentable in a way that a whole specific, gender or identity of people, the way that men want you to look, like it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know, that message just became more clear over time that it is soul sucking to be so preoccupied with what people think of you.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I think just kind of stayed with me. I'm also a youngest child. I've always just kind of like done what I wanted and been a little bit more wild and rebellious and assertive. But that's something that I'm really, really grateful for that's grown over time, which is, I care about what people think with regard to my community and my people and my best friends. And I care that they know that they're cared for, but I don't care what people think of me, right? Professionally, I want my clients to have, trust in me and my clinical competence and my education, right? But I don't care about someone's opinion for my life. I don't ask for it. I don't, I'll consult with friends and people who know me. But I think it's a really crucial part of general wellness, psychological, physical wellness, let alone leaving Mormonism, which is you gotta let go of what people think of you and the way you're living your life. I don't know what my home ward is saying about me. And I don't care. It's not my business, but also why would that add any value to my life and I was raised Mormon, so I can imagine she's covered in tattoos now. And I saw that she posted a photo of a tattoo with a woman smoking marijuana. And, there are plenty of things that people can, look at in my life and say, ooh, I don't like that. Like, that's not good. And that's fine. Like you can believe whatever you want. You can feel however you want about a person's life, but you've got to disconnect from that. Otherwise you're not really going to follow your intuition and doing what you want to do. If I cared what people thought, I would not have raised my child by myself. That would have been too embarrassing and hard. If I cared what people thought, I probably wouldn't have, I don't think I would have done anything that I've done in the last 8 years of my life specifically. Letting go of people's opinions, letting go of what people, think of you
Yeah.
It's where you're free. It's where you get to have clarity in knowing what you want.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm noticing about you at this part of the story. And I don't know, but it feels like from the time the bishop kind of gave this, disappointment, right? I'm handing you now disappointment, that there was just some type of, but I want to notice it. Like, I think it's really interesting because I do see you deciding on some level, like, I'm going to choose to have this baby. I want this baby. People are going to have feelings about it. In the end, it's my feelings, or I'm willing to deal with that and go with my feelings. And same with kind of this empowerment of, and I'm going to do this program at Columbia, an Ivy League university, with a baby, being pregnant and having a baby. And I just think it's worth noting this point in your life where you do that, because I think for many women in a transition moment, moving away, trying to have a new identity, it can take it can take time. It takes time, right, to release opinions, practices to release what other people think, make enough room that you actually can hear what you think, that you can connect to what you think. And same with even a story you've been told now for years you're going into, right? A bishop's office, getting assessed, being told maybe not quite yet, maybe no sacrament quite yet for you, maybe no saying prayers, but you move and shift into empowerment. It's like, I'm going to do the program. Yeah. And by the way, I'm pregnant and having a baby too, And I just think that is powerful. And I think, sometimes women want the empowerment before the journey, to have that sense before. What I'm hearing for you is like a mixture. Like, you had a sense of, I think I'm going to go for it, but you also had uncertainty of like, and I'll work really hard and I'm really hoping it goes well. And anyway, it's just a point in your story that I think it's worth shining a light on. And it's a touch point for the shifts that happened in those moments that seem to have changed your life.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I think, you're right in, emphasizing these areas of our, psychology within Mormon culture. And I guess what I want to say about that is we're taught that this is like being prideful or being stubborn.
Or self-centered.
Self-centered. Mm-hmm. Beware of pride, Emma Smith, right? Like these moments of being determined, these moments of saying, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to apply to this program. I'm going to do this thing.
Or autonomous.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like feeling, and don't get me wrong, like as you mentioned, some moments of, I don't know how this is going to go. Like, this might be really hard. What if I have to drop out? I don't know. But also just, quite frankly, it was that emotional and psychological Mormon rebellion where I thought, it's not rocket science. It's a social work program, and I'll figure it out.
And people have been having babies for a long time.
People have been having babies for a long time. For a long time. And you're like, how hard could it be? And it was hard in terms of energy. It was hard in terms of like writing all these papers. But it wasn't anything close to impossible. It wasn't anything close to out of my intellectual realm of what I was capable of doing. Yes. And that was, I think that's the best part of my life right now, which is everything that I'm doing, as a mom and as a provider, as a business owner, as a therapist, as someone who, gets to support my family and financially help my mom out. I didn't think I was capable of this. Like I honestly bought into this very sexist idea that there was an intellectual discrepancy among men and women in what I was capable of doing. And that feels really disgusting to admit, but admitting it is important because the contrast is reality. The contrast is, of course I can do this. Mm-hmm. Like, of course I can. And to be surprised by that, like what a plot twist in life that, this straight and narrow path. It's so narrow. Just the phrasing that it's straight and narrow is where you'll be safe. It's where you get predictability. It's where everything's going to fall into place.
It's where the church exactly wants you to go.
Yeah, and it causes a lot of shame and sadness and detriment because of all the people doing everything right and it still doesn't work out.
That's right.
Right?
It's funny. The church wants you to be straight and narrow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes in therapy I give this little metaphor.
Many meanings there.
Right. Sometimes I give this little metaphor in my therapy sessions, especially with, faith transitions. Of it's not the straight and narrow anymore. It's kind of like you're on a four-wheeler and you're blazing a new trail and there's like a swamp over there and there's like kind of looks like a desert and a bunch of rocks over there and you're just going to figure it out. And some places you're going to say that wasn't the right thing and that's okay. I'm going to come back. And you're figuring it out, which I think for a lot of us is overwhelming and scary. I just want someone to tell me what to do. I just want someone to tell me, it doesn't work that way, by the way. Someone telling you what to do and guiding you through the guarantee of a patriarchal blessing, plot twist, it still doesn't work if you choose it. And the reality is, you can trust yourself. And you're not going to do it alone because nobody does it alone. We need a village. We need friends. We need people who love us. In fact, I would be absolutely remiss if I did not include the detail of my singles branch in Brooklyn who threw me a baby shower, a co-ed baby shower. And it was 38 people with a ton of Amazon gift cards and a ton of baby wipes and a ton of diapers. I was absolutely in vulnerable circumstances. I'm going to this school, which is incredible and prestigious, but didn't have the money for it by any means. I'm living off of loans and everybody showed up. The community really showed up, moved out here to Utah after I graduated. I had a 1-year-old and it was people who I met in Mormonism who said, hey, you can stay with me until you find a place.
Yeah.
It was people I met in the Mormon church who donated so many baby books and so many clothes and so many things as I'm starting off again, very vulnerably as a single mom, living off of assistance until I got a job. It was hard. I was hustling, but I was also taking advantage of any resources I could qualify for while accepting that service, accepting that generosity. Now I can be on the other side of that of helping someone in that circumstance because it's not just the Mormon church's branding or monopolization of community. We're really incredible at it, but it's primal and it's ancient and it's inside all of us to need each other.
Yeah.
So there were aspects of, doing this myself and independently loving myself more to have the confidence that I could do it. And then there was also the need to rely on people who were rooting for me.
That's right. Yes. I hear that.
So 2 questions. Why in the world would you come back to Utah? And how did you process your loss of faith, your reconstruction of identity, spirituality, community? For a lot of people, that takes a lifetime, at least 3, 5, 10 years, just to unwire the Mormon stuff, rewire a new existence, heal from trauma. So why Utah and how? I'm assuming you've processed your Mormon stuff, but if you have, how did you do that and when?
Yeah. So a few things with coming back to Utah. At the time that I was living in New York with my baby, so graduated from my program, had my baby, and I was planning on staying there. I was very scared, but I was planning on staying there under the, circumstances of the roommates that I was living with. And that was a gay couple, 2 men. They actually broke up while I was living with them. So they were going to go their separate ways. And I thought to myself, I don't know. I didn't think too long and hard about it. I just thought this might be really overwhelming to try to get a studio. This might be really overwhelming to try to do this by myself in terms of, a living circumstance. And because I had spent so much time in Utah and I had so many different jobs in the field of social work, I was very well connected. And so Utah for me was a decade of singles wards. That's a lot of people you meet, right? So I was just very, socially speaking, very well connected here. Knew a lot of people in different areas of social work. And I just felt that as a new mom who was a year in, it was a good thing for me to have a start with a big community foundation. Yeah. So that was kind of an easy choice. And it was great. Lots of friends helping out. Like I said, living with people before I got my apartment.
It's also cheaper here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it just felt like, the most secure choice.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be great. Got a great job. Got licensed here, clinically licensed here. Everything worked out. And as far as faith deconstruction, navigating values, navigating beliefs, areas of existence, life, death, etc., I don't even know how to summarize it, but it feels really good and it feels really secure.
How did you work through the hard stuff and the CPTSD or whatever you probably experienced? What resources or experiences were helpful in you?
Yeah. I mean, first, I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the nail in the coffin for me, belief-wise, was 2015, right? Just policy-wise, I thought, no, this is all, it just evaporated. None of it felt real anymore. When I stopped going to church completely, and maybe more specifically, when I removed my name, was after I heard the interview with the woman who was a survivor of Joseph L. Bishop.
Oh, McKenna Denson?
Yes,
McKenna Denson.
I was listening to the recording of her interview. My daughter's like maybe 16 months at the time. And that was when I just decided I don't want any part in this whatsoever. I don't want them to be able to contact my kid. I don't want them to be able to contact me.
And for those who don't know the story, what was it about the story that was so disturbing to you?
So McKenna Denson is, confronting Joseph L. Bishop, although this is toward the end, regarding his assaultive behavior as an MTC president in Provo.
Over missionaries.
Kind of
sister zeroes missionaries. In on a vulnerable sister missionary.
He also provides the historical context of his assaultive and predatory behavior as a bishop. And the thing that I got from that interview was that leadership
Mormon leadership
knew what type of man this was, knew that he's a predator, knew that he has a problem, is how they summarize it in giving him more callings with more leadership and more people to, be in close proximity to him. He's a sexual predator. I mean, that's it, right? Like the summary of his problem is he's a sexual predator. He identifies who is an easy victim. He identifies who he can groom. And whether it was his calling as a bishop, whether it was his calling as an MTC president, he's the one that provides the details regarding leadership, moving him around, in different areas of responsibility to kind of like cover up the damage he has done. And that's just called organized sex abuse. Like that's what that is. So
it's systemic, unfortunately.
It's systemic, exactly, yeah. Right? The first presidency, specifically, they know who mission presidents are. Mission presidents, MTC president, right? These are all callings that go through the first presidency. And for them to know about him being a sexual predator and saying like, well, this will make it right. It hit me in a way that nothing else had hit me as hard. I think I'd maybe compartmentalized areas of the Catholic Church and thought that was different. And it's not. So like, I'm a mom. I'm here to protect my kid. I'm also happen to be a mandated reporter. Like, no, absolutely not. Like this is absolutely ridiculous. And while I don't need to like shout this from the rooftops to everyone I love who's in the church, I want to protect my kid. And there's a lot of risks out there. As a social worker, you work very close with the effects of predatory behavior or predators, period. No, absolutely not. This was like one of the safest things I could do for my kid. This is one of the most protective decisions I could make as a mom. Is mom's name is off the record, and her name was never on there. So, just got out of there. Shortly after that happened, after I removed my name, after listening to that interview, my dad died, and it was really sudden and it was really unexpected. And there's a lot of complexity to it. He died from his medication, collapsed in a gas station parking lot while getting cigarettes one day, went into anaphylactic shock. It was totally the fault of a doctor, although we've never really, navigated, justice with that scenario. But it was really, 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 really hard, obviously, but it was awful to have had the majority of my relationship with my dad actually being really negative. And there's a lot to say there. He was a really protective dad. I don't think he was very respectful to my mom, and that's maybe what I looked at the most as a kid. So I didn't like my dad. I really didn't like him growing up.
Did he feel like you saw him as a disappointment or as lesser than because he wasn't an active, faithful member?
Yeah, I think that hurt him. I think, that was hard for him, that I really held that against him. In addition to other variables, that he was undiagnosed bipolar, and, so manic episodes led to a lot of extreme spending and a lot of fights with my parents, like that there were a lot of things there kind of intermingled in his life and how I saw him. But, actually after I had my daughter, my dad and I became pretty close. So when he died, there's like this much gratitude that I got 2 good years with him. And then there's just so much sadness and so much grief that like, this is it. Like oh my goodness, I'm in my early 30s and I have an almost 2-year-old and my dad's dead. And now I don't believe in this plan of salvation. I don't believe in all these things that previously felt so secure. Or did they? I mean, they really didn't actually. But like all these things that kind of gave the narrative of, and this is what happens. So, his funeral at the time was really, really, really difficult because it was still all about the plan of salvation.
The funeral service.
Yeah. The funeral service for my dad in an LDS church, beloved by the ward, beloved by the stake, et cetera.
Even though he wasn't a member.
Oh, that's
not a member.
That's really interesting.
And that's like, my childhood pain of like, we're not sealed.
Right.
And it could have been a funeral service all about him. I mean, he was hilarious. He was like a TV character, like just one of the funniest, loudest, ridiculous people in the world. And I miss him so much. And I wish we could have honored his life at that funeral as opposed to, a 25-minute talk about the plan of salvation and how it works.
Right.
And that just felt really awful. So the reason I'm mentioning my dad's death in this, trajectory of my beliefs and my spirituality, et cetera, is that was a really pivotal point for me. I mean, grief is just so awful to go through. Most of us are uncomfortable with it and don't know how to talk to people about it. But at the same time, I'm having a total faith crisis and I don't know what I believe and I don't know where he is and I don't know what exists and I don't know how this all works.
Yeah.
And it was really, really disorienting, especially when it comes to, bless their hearts, Mormon individuals trying to make things better by saying awful things like, I know you don't believe this, but, he's in the spirit world waiting for you or, or whatever. Or just like, I know you don't believe this, but, and that's a hard thing to say to someone who's going into this difficult direction of navigating grief, navigating this awful, awful loss while in this total like faith and existential crisis of, I just don't know what I believe. But it's taken a lot of time and therapy and reading and a lot of great experiences to get to this point, which is, on one hand, death is a part of life, right? Like we grieve forever. There is no crying enough tears and punching, a grief card of like, okay, it's forever,
Right.
like I noticed that if I haven't cried over my dad for a while, there's going to be a big cry coming up. So I can do it intentionally and listen to my Dead Dad playlist with Al Green and Kenny Loggins. And, I can get into it and remember him and miss him and like really be intentional about it. Or I can like suppress it and just wait for it to like break open one day, which is okay too. But either way, like it's with me forever. And, anytime anyone's ever asked me, what do you believe now? I sometimes say, and this is both a joke, but real, like, have you seen the movie Interstellar? That's it. I think, Ethan Hawke said something in an interview I think is really beautiful where he said, I don't think we can comprehend our existence any more than a dog can. And when you watch that movie Interstellar, you're just like, whoa, quantum physics, multiple realities, right? Like multiple areas of time and space. And I'm by no means making any efforts to try to understand that more, but that's actually more comforting to me to believe in or hope in this idea that nothing is ever really destroyed. Matter isn't created or destroyed. Everything is just kind of endless and timeless. And when I choose to remember my dad, when I choose to grieve, I can feel connectivity to him. And it doesn't have to be this like depressing atheist nail in the coffin of that's it. Right. Because on one hand, that's a little egocentric to think that my conscious reality is a beginning and an end. I don't know. I embrace the overwhelm. I embrace the confusion. I embrace the fact that none of us know and none of us can actually explain all of it. But it also takes away so much fear and it takes away so much pressure. If I'm existing in 15 trillion realities right now, and this is the one I'm conscious of, and this is the life where I was raised Mormon, and this is the life where I became a single mom and a therapist and got knocked up and went to grad school. I'm good with this one. I'm like, it's pretty good so far. Yeah. And I'm excited for whatever else is in the future. I hope I'm an old lady on a beach house with like 7 cats one day. We'll see. But I no longer think that there's any comfort in this like rigid black and white, straight and narrow thinking. Not to imply that I have all the answers, not to imply that I know, right? Like we say that first Sunday of every month, I know. Like we have to really give everybody the reassurance of you have to know. And that's just bullshit. Like when is that ever true that you have to know everything?
Or that you can't.
Right. So I don't know. One of my favorite books in the whole entire world is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This idea of like visiting these different realities, leaving the one you're conscious of and depressed about, and it's not going the way you want. And this idea that like having a life is a really beautiful thing. I love that book so much. A book that was very, very pinnacle in helping me with my faith crisis specifically was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Us too.
And the reason that helped me specifically was I was pregnant at the time, and it really hit me, speaking of letting go of other people's thoughts, this idea of, is it really bad taking this polarized thinking? Is it bad or is it good? Like, other people can look at me and my pregnant body and my single status, and they can say, oh, I just feel so bad for her. Or, they could be embarrassed, or they could say like, oh, and what if I don't feel that way? Like, what if it's not bad? In fact, that's something that my dad said to me when I told my parents I was pregnant, which was one of the scariest moments of my whole entire life. Telling them like, hey, remember how I told you I was going to an Ivy League school? Still proud of me? Okay, also, I'm pregnant and I'm single and I'm keeping the baby and I'm going to do this. I understand if you're upset, and
Papa, don't preach.
Seriously. The funny thing was I did not expect this from my dad at all. I thought he would be so upset. I thought he would be so disappointed. I thought he would be angry. And he said something that was really beautiful. He said, what if this is a really great thing? Like, I've been wanting you to get married. I've just been hoping that you would find the right guy, but what if this is the right path? Like, what if this is it? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, exactly. But that was really helpful and really beautiful for him to show me this more open-minded way of thinking about it. Like,
and also said no Mormon dad ever.
Right. Exactly.
Probably. I mean, maybe.
Yeah. Right. Well, and going back to that book, A New Earth, that was kind of what I got from that of like, what if it just is?
Right.
Like, what if this is your life and every life is a really complicated, beautiful, messy story? And what if you can change the way you feel about it by just saying like, yeah, this is it. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that felt good. Not just relieving. It just like it felt right, Yeah. So just, taking away the polarity, taking away this problematically linear way of thinking, even when it comes to mental health. I mean, don't be offended by this to the lovely listeners, but it's a little funny to me when people talk about aspects of healing as if they've like solved something with a period, with an ED.
Right.
Totally.
Like it's, glad I worked through that. I'm healed.
I worked through that. I've done a lot of healing. I could go off. And I mean, on one hand, like that can be true for a lot of us, right? And then also understanding life keeps going.
Right.
And not to get real dark, but like more people in your life are going to die. Mm-hmm. More stuff is going to happen. But I do not believe that life is just about pain. I think pain organically happens. And I also think that suffering is a choice. There's a really great book called Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott, where she really emphasizes that like pain happens. Like pain is a part of life, working through things, leaving toxic things, like, learning to love ourselves throughout this whole process. But understanding that suffering is a choice. The pain's not going to stop. Like, we'll still be met with a lot of hard things, but we're going to navigate it. Like, that's the idea, that we get better at coping. We get better at grounding. We get better at calling a friend and saying, I really need help. Is there any way you can help me, like this weekend with my kids? Or like, we learn what the resources are in terms of getting us through hard moments, as opposed to I've figured it out.
Right.
It's gonna, this is kind of why from a, business model perspective, therapy is not a bad business to go into. When I was in grad school, we were taught what I believe is problematic in that, you should be able to have like 12 sessions, a few months with somebody, and that gives them all this. And that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, that you can go to a few sessions of therapy and then you're set for life. I mean, I can't tell you how many times a client has come back because something awful happened in their life and they got to talk about it and they got to process it. And, I hope this isn't depressing or ominous or negative for anyone when I say pain is going to continue to happen. And also, if that's a really triggering thing to hear, I think that just speaks to, how you're seeing life right now. But we get better at it. We get better at managing the pain. Mm-hmm. We get better at managing the symptoms. I think a really great, analogy and literal circumstance, frankly, is for a lot of us women or, uterus owners who have menstrual cycles. A lot of us go through this in our young 20s, and it's like, I'm going to break up with them. I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to send this text. I'm not okay. And then we stop and go, wait, hold on. What week is it? Okay. I'm going to rest. I think I need to take a nap. I think I need to eat some lasagna. I think I know what's happening. I know what's happening with my body. It does not mean I'm crazy. It just means a lot of things are amplified right now, and I need to learn how to care for myself. I really think menstrual cycles are like a beautiful way of learning coping skills, because getting more in tune with our state of mind, getting more in tune with, okay, my depression is like really coming up this week, or like a lot of triggers from my ex are happening right now. Or, for us to kind of sit with it and say, there's nothing wrong with me and what do I need?
Yeah.
Like healing is a really cool thing. It just means we get better and better and better at taking care of ourselves.
Right. Right.
Beautiful.
Something that I was noticing, I think for many people going through a faith transition, a death, right, becomes a fear. It can be a fear for people. And I was thinking about how it was an overlay, right?
Yeah.
You were actually transitioning and had experienced a death. How would you talk about, I feel like a number of fears in some ways come up in your story where you have faced something that at some point you were taught to fear, right? How would you talk about what has happened for you largely when you have faced a fear? You can take the loss of your dad or facing a death of someone, and who you've met on the other side of that.
I think the funny thing about those fears or about those circumstances, again, going back to it's not that black and white. It's not that simple. Life is very complex. On one hand, going back to my dad's death, I miss him, and it is a hole in my heart, and it is something I will always come back to with a lot of sadness, and on some days anger, and on some days gratitude, and like it's very complicated. But it would be so incorrect for me to say, I just wish it never happened, because my life changed after that. Like I see life differently. Like I appreciate life more. That was the first time in my life that someone close to me died. Someone in my recent text messages, someone in my FaceTime from 2 days ago. That was just absolutely life-changing. And to realize that like it can just all be over is, I think, a really crucial point of our learning, for us to look inward, for us to think about life, for us to appreciate our life. On one hand, my dad's death makes me a better mom. All of this stuff maybe sounds weird to say unless you get it, and then it doesn't sound weird at all. But, the paradox or the combination of these conflicting truths, that the tragedy we are so afraid of can also turn into this incredible pinnacle point of learning and figuring out who we are.
Right.
And so I think, when it comes to the people I've met along the way, I think some of the most important people in my life are coincidentally women who have left Mormonism and women who can relate on these areas of, patriarchy and doubting themselves. Those have been people in my life who have just been cheering me on, here for the conversations, here for the conversations about parent death, here for the conversations about any of it. I just, I'm reading this book that my therapist asked me to read, and now without finishing it, I'm hypocritically asking some of my clients to read it. But it's called How We Show Up. I believe the author's name is Mia, I think Birdsong is her last name. How We Show Up. And it's all about community. And so, in navigating these fears and these scary moments and how am I going to do this? I mean, we actually can't do it alone. We need people. We need community. And I think for those of us in Utah, that is actually a really beautiful thing to have hope in, which is that you can find your people. You can find people who are there for you. These are women in my life who have helped me build the confidence that I can start my business, that have helped me see things clearly when I needed to leave a relationship that was so, so, so awful and abusive. Women in my life who have said, hey, I'm going to bring you dinner and I'm going to take your kid for the night. I know that you're going through an abortion and you're going through that tonight. Just That's how we do it. Yeah, we can do it alone, but we're not okay. You know, the way that we get through these things and we get through them healthily and we get through these really difficult areas of, you know, fear and turmoil is we accept the love that we know people deserve. And so I would say community. The reason I mentioned that book specifically is, you know, when you read about it and you believe in it and you recognize how it hits with your value system, you're probably going to have the natural repercussion of manifesting it. And manifesting is neurological. It's not just specific to going into the woods and, you know, talking to crystals or anything. I don't mean to be an asshole about that. What I mean is like, I think sometimes we take the phrase manifestation or manifesting, and to some degree, some of us roll our eyes, but this is about our neurology, which is your perception, your belief is going to affect what happens in your life. So I'm reading this book and I'm thinking about like how I need more community in my life, need more people, and I'm envisioning it and I'm hoping for it. And then these amazing plot twists happen. I met a woman in my building like a few weeks ago who's a single mom, and we swap our kids every now and then to go have some alone time or to go on a date or to go do nothing or to go work. And it's great. And of course it's great. That's how we're designed. We're not designed to be this separate. We're not designed to be this isolated. We're not designed to be alone with our kids all day. Like, of course that drives us insane, right? We need help. And we need community. We need people. So I think in terms of who I met along the way, a lot of those people used to be Mormon, so we're used to it. We're used to this idea of showing up for each other, because that's a really beautiful thing that the church teaches us to do, which is to be cognizant of each other's needs. I mean, after my dad died, and my mom, you know, is really, really loved by her home ward, we had meals 3 times a day for 2 weeks. I mean, just completely taken care of in the way that every single human on the planet should have. Nobody should have to cook during those weeks of planning and attending a funeral. Nobody should have to think about anything. I don't care if you have religion or no religion or whatever. We need it. We need to have people close to us, not only in proximity, but just emotionally checking on us.
Yeah.
I've noticed that in the ex-Mormon community, specifically for women, it is very common for ex-Mormon women to sometimes question and or explore their sexuality. Do you want to talk about you self-disclosed as having a bisexual identity? Do you want to talk about that at all? That process for you?
Yeah.
Just in the context of how it may be useful for other women or men.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to go into like any gender, any identity, because like the fact is when we have a culture that predominantly presents heterosexual relationships, we are given the assumption that that's the majority, that's the norm, that's the standard. And through capitalism specifically, like that's part of success, you know, like, and any other way of living, you know, could be risky or it could be wrong or, you know, however it's taught to us. I mean, I guess it was just something that I never necessarily considered. I just assumed I'm a heterosexual woman, default, and that's it. Kind of like I assumed I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom with 10 kids. That was also a default for me. Wasn't true. Also wasn't true that I'm heterosexual. And I mean, to be completely, you know, candid about that, I had a few sexual experiences with women while living in New York. And I mean, consensual, positive, great, but still in my mind thinking that was just having fun. I'm hetero though. And it actually took, you know, a partner of mine, a male partner who referred to me as being bi. And I kind of said, what are you talking about? This is probably like 2019. And I'd had many sexual experiences with women at that point, many more with men, but enough to know that it was positive, it was consensual, I enjoyed it. And my partner, my male partner at the time said, Allison, you like men, you like women, you're bisexual. Like that it's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I knew there was nothing wrong with that. I had a clinical, clinical license and a master's degree in social work. Like I know there's nothing wrong with it, but that cognitive dissonance was still there that I didn't even see it. Mm-hmm. So it's funny. Like it doesn't matter what level of education you have. It doesn't matter, the irony of that moment where you realize something about yourself that's hard to see. It's because of conditioning. It's because of the way you're raised and this cognitive dissonance effect that can have on you in not even considering something so obvious.
Right.
I mean, even as a kid or as a teenager, I can look back on crushes on boys and girls, or crushes on, boy and girl celebrity, man, woman celebrity, whatever. The evidence is there. I mean, the data was there, but it was just kind of hard for me to connect with, because what if that's disappointing to my family? I mean, I think that's what's under there. I think that's why that was hard for me to be honest about it. And so, yeah, if you grow up hypothetically in a society where you're just taught hey, you can like who you like, and the only thing that really matters is loving yourself and being safe and understanding consent and all these really basic principles of, education, who knows what this world would look like? Because I really, really, really believe that the combination of you must be heterosexual, you must be a hetero woman, you must be a hetero man, that in and of itself creates a huge wall for people to safely explore, let alone just consider what they may like in terms of, sex, but also in terms of the relationship they want to be in, if they want to be in one. Mm-hmm. So,
or gender.
Exactly. And so I just think that is a really big pain, when we talk about patriarchy, when we talk about areas of, sexism, whether it is, domestic violence, or whether it is rape, or, any of these areas of how just, women, children, et cetera, can be hurt. I really, really believe, and this is a theory that I'm sure many of us share, that one of the pains of patriarchy is also, frankly, violence projected by the inner hatred or inner repression of men who do not get to freely navigate their sexuality. I mean, Silence of the Lambs is one of my favorite movies for a lot of reasons. But one of them is, a serial killer who internally wants to be and wants to identify and live as a woman, and he can't, so he murders them or kidnaps them, or, projects his inner hatred on existing women who, he later kills and, uses as clothing, et cetera. Sorry if I'm ruining the whole thing. And what do you know? It's this incredible, competent woman who figures out the whole entire thing. It's just one of the best movies in the world. Great book, right? Love it. But I also think that, that metaphor or allegory is really relevant to our society when it comes to the unspoken pain of men, whether we are talking about childhood sexual abuse, whether we are talking about rape, whether we are talking about the inner hatred of feeling gross or feeling shame about what they desire. And I'm not talking about unhealthy things. I'm talking about the consideration of being bisexual or being trans or being gay, being homosexual, whatever that is, there is so much reinforcement of don't be that. And instead, use women as the cover up or the shield or the beard or whatever. Their mental health be damned, they get to be a casualty on this planet as you get to use them as your, utility of what you have to uphold. And And that's a complicated discussion, because if we're talking about the trauma that men experience who are conditioned in society to not talk about it, to not be open about it. Mm-hmm. You know, I recently watched the documentary Leave No Trace about the organized sex abuse in the Boy Scouts. And, you know, there's a problem with the social media backlash of hating all men. And, you know, on one hand, I want to make space for anybody's emotional reaction to the frustration of patriarchy, of course. I think that documentary really places a crucial highlight of pain in areas of pain that are evenly distributed. I think that child sex abuse is a very, 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 very common thing that happens to all people, regardless of how they identify or, you know, how they're sex assigned at birth. It's just unfortunately a very common trauma. And when we look at the way that boys and girls grow up, however, boys are given a lot of incentive and pressure to not disclose vulnerability, especially when it's really horrific pain. Mm-hmm. And so what happens when you bury that? Mm-hmm. You know, what happens when you bury that pain? Or, you know, if we're not talking about sexual trauma, which can both be full of like shame and discomfort and embarrassment, or if we're talking about navigating sexuality, you know, maybe wanting to navigate like a healthy sexual dynamic as a man with another man. And if that is predominantly talked about as gross or perverted or disgusting, or you don't know that any of your male friends will stay in your life if you say that out loud, that can lead to the repercussions of a lot of projected pain. And maybe that looks like violence, or maybe it looks like control. Maybe it looks like domestic violence. Maybe, you know, I think that the idea of navigating our sexuality just needs to be the most acceptable, neutral thing in the world. Because I think the repercussions are really horrific when we repress something that should just be normal.
Yeah.
Infidelity too?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there are so many symptoms of repression, so many symptoms. And it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. You know, if you're unhappy in a relationship or a marriage, there's a way to navigate that. There's a way to see what is sustainable. There's a way to see if we need to like peacefully uncouple. Like, I think the repercussions of what we do to just further cover it up is where we just create more pain. Right. So yeah, sexual exploration, you know, with safety and with the assurance of, you know, consent and all of those things, it can be so great. It can be so wonderful. And yeah, let's go back to that funny thought that we believe the default is most of us are straight. Not enough information to assume that whatsoever. With the idea of being closeted as something that is now a growing number of people saying, oh, now I'm navigating this. Yeah. You know, I think Tilda Swinton said something really beautiful about the fluidity of gender and sexuality, which is, you know, it's continuous. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, today I identify as bi. I don't know what my life is like in 10 years. I just know that when navigating areas of relationships, dating, et cetera, like interested in men, interested in women, and that just feels right for now. Like, we'll see. Right. But it's really great to not feel any pressure or, you know, need for that to be problematic or embarrassing.
Right.
And it's easier said than done. I get that. Not everybody has the quick reassurance of my friends will still love me, my family will still talk to me. Yeah. You know, it can be a really lonely and brave but horrific experience for people in identifying what is true for them.
That's right. Yeah.
And I also want to say, I don't think the other option is an option. I just think truth is truth is truth. And so acknowledging your truth and having the hope and the faith and the belief that things will work out. We all need to find our people. We all need to find our support system. We all need to find what it looks like to live a happy life. But it doesn't work to bury it. It doesn't work to push it down. It just doesn't.
I was wondering if you wanted to share any insights or thoughts on parenting. Yeah. Especially, outside a conditioned paradigm.
Yeah. It's funny. My daughter said to me a few months ago, might have been sometime last year, she asked me if I believe in God. And I said, no, I don't. She goes, oh, well, I believe in God. I said, okay, that's fine. She goes, well, why don't you? I said, we can believe different things. It's okay. You can believe in God. I used to believe in God. I used to pray to God all the time, but I don't anymore. Well, why don't you? Well, it just doesn't feel right anymore. But again, you can believe what you want. That's a really cool thing about people. A lot of us believe different things, and we do different things, and we wear different things, and we're all different, and that's okay. And, it was this funny moment in my conscious parenting where I'm like, okay, I'm glad. I'm happy with where I took that. I'm happy with that. Yeah. As opposed to the rigidity of like, this is an atheist family and we believe in quantum physics of interstellar and everything matters, but nothing matters. And there's no one person. That's ridiculous, right? Like, yeah, this is what
the new orthodoxy,
right? The new orthodoxy of like, not in this family. This is what we believe. So that's something I'm really grateful for, which is being raised in Mormonism. And Mormonism very unintentionally taught me how to be a parent by teaching me how to not be a parent. Mm-hmm. Like not that I literally believe in God or this is a possibility, but if a leader or higher being or anyone said, in order to do the right thing and obey me, you need to kill your daughter. Nope. Like, absolutely not. I think the Isaac Abraham parable is one of the loudest examples to me of what Mormonism can potentially teach parents to their detriment. Mm-hmm. And that's not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I want my kid to trust me. I want her to feel safe. There will be plenty of moments where I need to, put my foot down and show concern or say no or, whatever. And that's fine. But I want her to know that like her safety is my concern.
Yeah.
And her wellness. Like that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can believe in God. You can whatever, like any things that you want to explore in terms of your identity and figuring out who you are. It's fine. Yeah. That stuff is fine. But I need to make sure that I have a closeness with her so that she knows that her safety, her life, like that's why I'm here. I'm here to be her mom.
Right.
And of course, like I hope that there's also, friendship and trust and all these beautiful things. But I think that Mormonism has the repercussion of cold authoritarian parenting. I know that's not true for everybody. But I mean, I have to say in my clinical practice, specifically in working with couples and with individuals, it is a very common scenario to take a pretty long time healing based on the Isaac Abraham type of Mormon parents that you have. Mm-hmm. For them to think or even say things like, I'd rather you have a terminal illness than leave the church, or, like just that whole sentiment, which is absolutely disgusting. Like we need a driver's license to go adopt a dog, but like anybody can just create life and say that to their kid, which not that I'm implying any intervention on that, but like that's the high stakes of parenting. You're developing a person's psyche. The way that you talk to them, the way that you make them feel in their own home will absolutely affect them in their future relationships. It just will. And so I think my main direction with my daughter is just, attachment. If I have her trust, and respect is important too. Like she's got to listen to me. I'm a single mom. I'm working a lot. I just like, there are moments where she's had to like come with me in meetings, and it's like, or, I'm working from home today. Daycare is closed. I'm in here doing my sessions. You only knock on the door if something's on fire. Like I need areas of her understanding, her empathy, her respect, et cetera. And now that she's getting older, that's, obviously a lot easier to do. But my main priority is our attachment, like her feeling safe with me. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing. I think that matters,
Yeah.
Because she's going to be whoever she's going to be.
Yeah.
And kids are going to become who they want to become, maybe as a repercussion or like a rebellious point. That also may happen. Or they're going to do it as they navigate what feels right for them. And they check in with you throughout adulthood and say, I don't know about this job. Can I talk to you about it? Like, what a beautiful thing to have a child and also like really affirm their independence. Because again, she's a child for the minority of her life. The rest of it is adulthood.
Right.
And hoping that I gave her the tools and the self-love and the confidence and the resilience to be able to navigate these things. I mean, I'm a phone call away. And like, but I want you to figure out the rest. That's kind of my biggest goal with parenting, is that I want to raise a resilient kid who can, figure this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And some of that, I'll attribute to my parents, but some of that was, frankly, what I had to figure out for myself of like, yeah, I can move to New York. I think I can do this. I got enough saved. Yeah, I think I'll be fine. Okay, I'll try this job. Yeah, I tried a lot of things with the mentality of like, I'll figure it out. I mean, if I can't afford New York, I guess I'll move, but I have a lot of savings. I think I'll be good. Right. I just want my daughter to be smart and competent and to know that she has community helping her, but to also like really trust herself. And without Mormonism in her life, without this power dynamic of needing to be good enough or worthy, I mean, we're already off to a great start. She's still talking very actively about what she wants to do when she grows up. Yeah. And whatever that is, I'm here for it. As long as you're happy, as long as you feel good about it. Like, what a cool direction, as opposed to, I need you to turn out this way. Mm. It's not that. It's just, I've got to do this work in nurturing you so that you feel safe. If you feel safe, if you feel competent, if you realize you can like do these things, you're totally capable.
Yeah.
You're going to have a more resilient kid who is more in touch with their intuition, who tries things and actually finds fulfillment. I don't have any, regret necessarily about my timeline, but I didn't go to grad school until I was 29 years old, because throughout my whole 20s, I was waiting to get married. I was actually given the words, honey, you go to college. This is when I was in high school. You go to college because what if your husband dies? Mm-hmm. I mean.
Right.
Which is funny, because sometimes when I'm down in Provo and I'm wearing a Columbia sweatshirt, I've gotten the occasional question of, did your husband go to Columbia? And I'm like, oh, no, he didn't. But anyway, yeah, so that's, a lot of this was presented to me as like insurance plans, and this, you still want to get married in the temple. You still want to be dependent on a man. You like get a job just in case, make sure you have skills, as opposed to the enthusiasm of like, drink life up, like figure out what you want, figure out what feels good. One of my biggest regrets, and I don't regret a lot, but I really regret not going to Italy with UVSC for their study abroad. It was for a humanities thing. And I just kept thinking, what if I miss meeting my husband? What if he's like at a singles ward activity and he's there and I miss him because I want, and it's like, So that's one of my goals for my daughter of like, hey, you're young, travel, take out some college loans, go see the world, just like go do these things. But yeah, there was a lot I held back on because in my 20s, I was just like, I just got to get married. And I'm getting this education just in case, but I just got to get married. Yeah. So anyway, going back to parenting, just I'm excited to be a girl mom and raising a girl to like just think consciously about what she wants in her life, because I think that's what the church was missing the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my final question that I'm curious about is just, what would you say when you're thinking about your past, the past self, early 20s mission, and all that you've been told and you've been conditioned to think at that point? What surprises you most about the life you're living now? When you think of her and how she would have, all that she was being told about the world, about life, like, what surprises you most in thinking of her and what she was told, you know?
I mean, she had absolutely no idea how smart she was, how capable she was, you know, like, I think that's the main thing. If my 21-year-old self could visit my 38-year-old self, and I'm still young, I got a lot of life to live. I'm excited for the rest. This is young adulthood, and I define that and acknowledge that. I really gotta make a moment to say it's problematic that we think 20s is like the pinnacle of existence, because like,
Yeah.
I would never go back to my 20s, even if you gave me $2 million. Ugh. Like, it just, it just gets better with more wisdom, with more time, with more identity. But that 21-year-old woman, that young girl, but woman, I think she would just be so surprised and relieved, and I just don't think she'd believe it. I think it would be hard to believe, maybe just visually, of like, wait, what? We like tattoos now? What? But if she could just kind of get a total download of everything, like, oh, I grow up and I keep going and I raise a baby by myself and I become a therapist and I go to a really, 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 really challenging Ivy League advanced clinical practice program in social work, and I kill it. I do really well at it. And eventually find, I would say one of the other points is like this, group of women, group of friends in my life who are family, who are there, who are nurturing. And it's like, I didn't know, first of all, that like everything will be okay and everything will work out. I think I just
mention
thought,
leave the church?
Oh, and leave the church. Yeah. Oh, and also you're not wearing garments anymore. And also, you don't like really believe like any of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And
sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
And
this is Mormon Stories. So.
Well, and just, and I feel, I know that there's this whole juxtaposition of like how I'm stuttering on my words right now because this is the way I was raised, but I didn't know I'd be successful.
Yeah.
I didn't know I would do this well. And it's not, it's not just manna from heaven. I mean, I'm working really hard, like I'm absolutely working hard to earn where I'm at, but I just never thought I'd do that well.
Yeah. I
never thought I'd be able to support my family in the way that I am. I never thought that my QuickBooks, income at this point this year would be that number. It's great.
Yeah.
And I, on one hand, holding my baby was the best feeling in the world, but I don't know, it really equates to making money. It just does.
It rivals, you mean?
That is something I'm going to say to my daughter, which is like, listen, other people are going to tell you different things and that's fine, but making your own money and going through hell of like those programs and all those assignments. And I wasn't naturally good at all this. I had a tutor for statistics. I had a tutor in high school for chemistry. I really worked hard to get through these things. Some of them were just getting passing grades. I worked really hard. And when it adds up to being a woman who's making money and making intelligent financial decisions and navigating savings and learning about investing and doing all these things that are frankly crucial as a provider, and in my case, as a solo parent and only parent provider, I don't know, holding my baby for the first time, doing my taxes, but both pretty good pretty good moments.
As they say,
Yep.
sixes.
They're both maybe
It's a yes
exactly the
and.
same. Exactly
Yes.
the same.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So as we end, and we have your consent for this, you mentioned your tattoos. Do you want to tell us what a couple of them mean to you, just for fun?
Yeah. So this one on my...
And describe it for the listeners,
Sure.
just so they can also...
Okay.
You can show it, but also describe it.
So this one, part of it was also like the experience. So this one, it's a woman, kind of looks like a saint. And I asked this artist, her name is Anka Labrive, I think is her last name. She recently tattooed Willow Smith's hand, so she's hard to get into now. But anyway...
Here in Salt Lake?
No, I know that
okay.
she lives in Montana. She travels now.
Okay.
This was in New York, though, when I got this tattoo. And my daughter was a baby. She's probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months old. I got this tattoo because of this contrast of being raised to, worship men and being raised to confess to men and get the approval from it. Just like this whole idea of patriarchy, deity, God, et cetera, all of that being male. And at the time, I'm like, I'm doing this by myself with community, with support. But like my body kept my baby alive. And I acknowledge half the zygote of the man that came into my body, and created life. I'll give that a little bit of credit. Not a ton of effort, but a little bit of credit. And my body did the rest, my body created this life. My body sustained this life. And believing in myself and believing that I could do it was actually what I needed the whole time.
Right.
It's like this Wizard of Oz plot twist of it was you the whole time. You've had that strength the whole time. You've had courage the whole time. You've had, all these beautiful things that you were looking for externally. And like, what if it's you? Worship yourself, girl. Like, you got this. You can do it, actually. And yeah, it'll be hard, but you can do it. The coolest thing about this, though, is as she was tattooing me, I told her, just given the pain I was experiencing, I said, hey, could you just talk to me? Could you maybe tell me about how you became a tattoo artist? And she told me about being born and raised in Ukraine. And my tattoo artist, Anka, says to her dad, when I think she was maybe like 12 or 13, she said, I want to be a tattoo artist. And he comes home the next day with a tattoo kit. I mean, this is in the 90s. He comes home with a tattoo kit in Ukraine, and he says, if you're going to do this, I want you to be serious about it. And I bought you this, and I want you to practice, and you can practice on me. And I'm like getting so emotional during this tattoo. I'm like, so your dad has all your early work on him? And she's like, yeah, he just really believed in me, but was like, you can do this. And I have a baby at home with a sitter. And I'm like, your dad is so amazing. Oh my God, he like really believed in you. And, just like culture wise to like look at his little girl and be like, you can do this, So there's like a little bit of like knowing the artist's backstory
Yes, you have a
and this
memory.
incredible encouragement she had from her dad who said, you can do this.
Yeah.
And also I want you to like really take it seriously. And so I just thought that was like one of the most beautiful stories.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, such a wonderful story.
Yes.
Such an inspiring and beautiful story. So thank you. And before we end, if somebody's looking for a therapist, what do you have to say about that?
If you're looking for a therapist and if you're feeling that this may be a good dynamic, as a disclaimer, I'm very blunt. Okay. I'm also
You just broke
focused.
the fourth wall.
I'm also
The
sorry.
third wall. No, I like it.
I'm focused
I
on
say
the
we do
rapport
it.
building
Look at the camera.
process.
Look at the camera.
I'm not scary, I promise. But part of, I understand that this can be like maybe a strange thing, doing a Mormon story, disclosing areas of, personal vulnerability. But then also, we all know therapists are people. We all know they have their own therapists. They have their own trauma. They have their own dead dads. They have their own stuff they're figuring out, So by no means do I think this is a detriment. I think for years I was wrestling with it and thinking like, is this a bad thing to do? And now I'm just like, hey, guess what? Every therapist is a human. It's fine. I don't think that's too much of a plot twist. But if you want to work with me, if that feels good for couples or individual therapy, and I'm not for everybody, but if this, maybe feels like, a person you want to work with, you can find me on Instagram, which is therapy with Allison _ Therapy with Allison _
Yep. And then the underscore.
Yep. And that will be the easiest thing. You can click on the link tree in my profile. I am currently taking clients, so you can just go on there and schedule. The only reason we might not be able to work together is when I read your intake paperwork, and if I feel like there might be some factors or variables that would make you a better fit for somebody else. However, just you can go ahead and schedule with me now. I also have a website connected to that link tree where if you're just looking for a therapist in general, I have a bunch of people on my website, just people who I personally think are great and wonderful. But yeah, I'm taking couples, I'm taking individuals. I love, love, love couples work. And after determining that there is a foundational and mutual interest in working on it and in, navigating the resilience and incredible strength factors in a relationship, it's just some of the most incredible work that there is. It is life-changing work. I love couples work so much. It is really hard. It is really exhausting. I recognize that it's expensive. I know personally that it's expensive. But I also, just want to encourage anybody who is currently in a very unhappy relationship. If you are wondering, what does this look like if we work on it? What does it look like as we sit on that therapy couch and maybe navigate, more of the issues? And what does this look like if we try to figure out if we can save this? It's one of the most important answers that you can navigate, first of all. And it's some of the most important work that we can do, which is dive into our individual and respective vulnerabilities, our individual trauma. I say to all my couples, it's not just about the goal of we need a better sex life or we need better communicate. It's not just that. We've got our own individual stuff that is showing up, and it's really, really, really beautiful work to do for a couple to facilitate healing with their vulnerability. I love it. I love individual work. I love couples work, but I love love, and I love seeing couples learn how to get out of chapters that seemed impossible.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So therapy with Allison _ on Instagram, therapy-with-allison.com.
Yep.
On the internet.
Yep. And I'm also on Psychology Today. You can see my profile on there. All of these are areas where you can book an appointment with me. And to be honest, I do try to avoid phone consultations just because that can kind of, get a little out of control in terms of my schedule. But, go ahead and go to my Instagram. You can kind of get a feel for some of the content on there. The reason that this may be a little valuable in terms of navigating if you think you want to work with me is I really believe the Psychology Today profile, for instance, doesn't give enough dynamic of personality to a therapist. And sometimes when you watch them interact, there's something almost difficult to describe about, I feel like I like them. I feel like I would want to work with them.
You should therapy shop. You should therapist shop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Allison Shiffler, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Margi, it's so lovely to do this with you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Such a pleasure today, really.
Thank you.
And hope you'll come back on Mormon Stories. I'm sure there's lots of opportunities for collaboration or episode content. So hope you'll come back.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories. We rely on your support to keep this going. So if you value this type of content and want to see it continue, you can go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, and we'll keep doing this for as long as y'all have interest and support. Thanks to everyone who makes this possible. Julia, Maven, Gerardo, Brooklyn, our board, Margi, everyone. It takes a village to run a podcast too. And thanks to everyone who makes this possible. Mostly thanks to our donors because we couldn't do it without you. Other than that, we've got lots of good episodes coming up in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Subscribe on YouTube and Spotify, because that helps with the algorithms. Share this with whoever you can. Give us your feedback at mormonstories@gmail.com. And we'll see y'all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Bye, everybody.